Got some folks coming in. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. If we could all please rise, please. Pastor Jeff Chitwood with Anchor Church will lead us in prayer. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's pray. Dear God, we come to you and we give you thanks for this beautiful day which we have here, and we give you thanks for the nation which we live in and the city. And Lord, I pray that you'll be with those who lead our nation, those who lead the city, that you will give them wisdom and insight in the decisions they make that impact the lives of others people. Lord, we thank you for their commitment and their dedication, and pray that you'll just watch over them. We thank you for those who serve in our military that bring us this freedom and protect it each day, and we pray that you might watch over them. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Councilwoman Carr, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba. Here. Councilman DeWitt.
Here.
Councilwoman Carr.
Here.
Mayor Simmons.
Here.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Here.
Councilman Gibson.
Here.
Councilman Forbes.
Here. Well, good morning, everybody.
Morning, Mr. Mayor.
Got a packed house this morning. That's great. Love to see everybody here. We're going to start with public comment on agenda items. Members of the public that would like to speak on agenda items, please come forward now. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Councilwoman Carr, welcome.
Thank you.
I liked your issues. I'm here to discuss trains. There is some work to be done on some trains. It's difficult to work with the railroad administration. They're tough, but they're necessary. And I hope that the bicycle train combination, which is, by the way, not unique, would be a flavor for the council to consider, because I feel that passenger service and train service in Florida is the future of transportation. When the mayor and I had to go to a conference when I was on the council, we had to fly from RSW to Atlanta, spend 3 hours in Atlanta, and fly back to Florida to go to a conference. Had we had train service, this wouldn't be the case. Secondly, I'd like to talk about outsourcing. I can't think of an attorney locally that has the institutional knowledge and the command of municipal law than Audrey. I worked with her for 4 years. I've always given her the highest evaluations. I think she's been accessible, and I can't see outsourcing. I think it's a great service to have in-house, to be able to speak by appointment with the city solicitor before the council meetings to make sure that we're on solid ground. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the expense we've had over the years of lobbying. If you go back 19 years and check and see how much we've spent on lobbyists, excuse me, if you want to save money, that's where you should be looking. The leagues of cities and towns should be our lobbyists. That's what we pay dues for. Lastly, I'd like to commend Greg DeWitt for sticking up for the city manager. I think his long service in public service, he understands that the city manager form of government is not a 8-man manager service. We voted for a city manager form of government. The council is supposed to provide policy, legislation, and oversight. And I get the feeling that the city council should stay within its purview and let the city manager manage. Carl has done a good job. I think he's should have been handled differently. and I wish him best in his retirement. Lastly, please take that Wonder sign down. We spent a lot of money on 041, and when you drive north to south, you see the sign Wonder Gardens, and it looks like third world country. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Debbie Giambo. I live on Bel Rio Drive off of West Terry, and I'm here to talk with you about the ALTA proposal for the West Terry corridor. I want you to know that I've done my homework before I came to talk with you. I've reviewed the ALTA PowerPoints that are posted on the city's website, and I appreciate the work that all of you and the city staff and ALTA are doing on this. I have communicated these concerns that I'm going to express to you to Brad Davis as well, with ALTA, although I don't know if he received that. In reviewing ALTA's PowerPoints, especially after they heard from the public on their proposals, I think there are three hugely significant pieces related to safety that are missing, and I don't know, of course, if they will be part of the presentation today or not. In their PowerPoint, they emphasized that people wanted safe crossings. And they put in their PowerPoint that there would be crossings near the transit stops. Having lived in that area for more than 7 years, I can tell you from spending numerous hours on West Terry for a variety of reasons, that if you compare the number of people getting on and off the public buses to the people crossing West Terry for other reasons, I've seen one person in that time getting on and off the buses. So clearly, crosswalks at those locations are insufficient. We need a sidewalk on the south side of West Terry. I did not see that in the proposal. And at the very least, if there isn't going to be a sidewalk on the south side, there needs to be safe transit to those crosswalks along the south side of West Terry. I don't want to see middle school children walking next to the traffic to get to the crosswalks or walking in the drainage ditches, and those right now are the options. So we need a sidewalk on the south side, or at the very least safe passage to those crosswalks. The last piece is, you've all seen when we are installing new traffic lights that they're put up, they're not turned on for a while so that everyone can get used to where they are. I would like to see temporary crosswalks right now in the locations where ALTA will put those crosswalks, so that first of all, we have crosswalks now, which we need with the significantly increased traffic we have on West Terry. If you've ever tried to pull out of a side street onto West Terry during season, you can sit there for 5 minutes. So we need those temporary crosswalks now, and a significant argument in favor of that is it will help drivers become used to them, become used to the locations before those sidewalks are elevated as ALTA proposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Morning, Ben.
Good morning. Ben Hershenson. Again, I attend the meeting, I always got to say something. First of all, let me start off with the issue of outsourcing. I could not be against something as much as I am this concept. When I decided several years ago, 13 years exactly, to build a home here, I did a lot of research. I studied Fort Myers, Sarasota, Naples, a lot of places. And I kind of like the smallness of the city of Bonita Springs. And the unique nature of this city is predicated on accessibility. I think Richard already used that term a few moments ago. That was what I was impressed with. I got involved in some committees and I was amazed. I got to know the city manager pretty well. At that time, it was Gary, and then got to know Carl, and certainly got to know the Audrey. And I was amazed. City attorney's accessible. You know, you send an email. You may not get an answer today, but you're going to get an answer within a few days. In fact, the entire city is that way. I don't know, I've interacted with so many staff people, department heads, in each and every one, affable, and no matter what personal problems they may have that they leave at home, they've always been outgoing and very, very accessible and willing to help you. You can sense it when you meet them. And certainly, be it Audrey or Carl or anybody else, you name the department. Yeah, it's just amazing. It really is. Matt and John and so forth. I could list a whole bunch of names. I don't know how they do the work that they do, because, gosh, if every citizen did this. That's what I like about my city, Bonita Springs. I could have gone to a whole bunch of other cities, but I chose this city for a lot of good reasons. I don't like outsourcing, because I'm not going to have accessibility the way I have now. I don't think I abuse it. I don't think anybody does. And if that happens, they're going to tell me. So I would say to the council members, absolutely, the discussion is important, very, very important, to hear everybody's viewpoint on the issue of outsourcing. But I hope each and every one of you will consider one thing, and always, anybody who sits on a board, I do this all the time on my HOA board, you listen to every single voice, you have to. But when the time comes to make a decision, you put one thing ahead of you, and that is what is in the best interest of each and every citizen. Not my personal feelings, but I want to know what's in the best interest of this community that I'm president of, what's in the best interest of the people I serve sitting on a city council. Those are the most important issues. Don't change the city of Bonita Springs that has become unique. We're not Fort Myers, we're not Orlando, we're not Tampa, and we're not Naples, and we're not Estero. If Estero is a brand new city and they want the source, so good for them. That's the way they're starting, that's what the people are going to get used to. But I'm used to an old system. Not that I'm old and not open to change, of course I am. But I know when something is, like we say in New England, if it ain't broke, please, ladies and gentlemen, don't try to fix it.
Thank you, Ben. Other members of the public? Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and everyone. For the record, Kathy McGrath. After listening to Richard and Ben, I agree with them 100%, and there's no use me going on and on and on. I am totally against outsourcing. I don't think it's necessary. We can agree to disagree, and I also want to state for the record, I agree with what Richard said too, and I remember last year, you know, that's one thing about living in a democracy. We all have the right to stand up here and express our opinions, as all of you up there have the right to do. But I wasn't in favor of the way things were handled last year when the evaluations came up, especially against Carl, and I wasn't happy a couple of meetings ago, but that's just my opinion. I've been behind him 100%. Things change, and we may not like it, but like I've told many people, you know, you all are up there. You are mayor and council people, and you were elected by the people. And as long as you're sitting up there, you'll get lots of respect from me, and I'm glad that I have the opportunity to say something. Now, the outsourcing I mentioned, I know later on in the public hearing about term limits, there is public comment allowed then, so I'm going to wait and save my comments on that until that time. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Other members of the public? I recognize those shirts. Good morning.
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is David Tim. I am a resident of Bonita Bay and the president of the Bonita Bay Bicycle Club. We have a few of our members here today representing 155 club members from our Bonita Bay community. On behalf of the club, I would like to thank you and the city staff for two specific items on today's agenda. First, the Terry Street Railroad crossing rehabilitation work. As both a driver and cyclist who frequently navigates this railroad crossing, I am grateful that the city has confirmed a project to make improvements to the crossing. It's rough going through on vehicles, but more concerning, a severe safety hazard for people going through the crossing on bicycles. Our club cyclists cross this on a daily basis, and we welcome improvements to make this a safe railroad crossing. Second, I commend the city of Bonita Springs for their vision on the Terry Street project. The multi-use pathway will benefit all residents of Bonita Springs. For our Bonita Bay community, it provides a safe option for recreational cyclists to enjoy the downtown area. In parallel to the pathway, improvements to the road surface, adding defined bike lanes, will benefit both vehicle safety and cyclist safety as we travel through this busy corridor. Our bike club participated in the trail visioning workshop hosted by Alta Design and Planning. We believe they are an excellent choice made by the city to proceed with this project. Our bike club also appreciates the personal interest of Deputy Mayor O'Finn and Operations Director Matt Feeney to address the concerns of road cyclists navigating through this street. Our club, as residents of Bonita Springs and cyclists on our roadways, look forward to this project moving forward. Thanks to the city of Bonita Springs for making this a community priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. See you in the neighborhood. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Councilman Grant, good morning.
Good morning. I would like to address items 7B and 8E at this time. I would like to ask the Alta consultant if they considered the life, safety, and civil defense implications of the importance of the Seminole Gulf Railroad package as an emergency route during pre-hurricane evacuation route and post-recovery return of emergency relief and construction supplies by use of Seminole Gulf Railway track after a hurricane, which this area is prone to. We must remember that we have 800,000 people living in Lee County and 500,000 people in Collier County, 200,000 people in Charlotte County. This is 1.5 million people in a hurricane area zone. Please remember the lives and safety of residents of the 30,000 Estero residents and 50,000 residents of Bonita Springs, and may the safety of those people be included in the potential use of Seminole Gulf Railway track as a civil defense railroad track. We can always put like in Bellwood, Pennsylvania, a overpass, pedestrian, ADA-friendly overpass over the railroad track. Let's not take out the railroad track. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Morning, Jesse.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Council, fellow Venetians. I had a couple things I wanted to say, but before I get into it, Carl, I wanted to say that you've undoubtedly left your mark on Bonita. And I've worked on numerous projects with you. I appreciate it. And look, we saved the water tower at the last minute. We never got the Terry and 41 billboard down, but I'll let you know if that ever does come to fruition. So, with that being said, term limits, I appreciate the vote last time around on term limits and moving it to 8 and 8. I think it was a very good move for us as a city, and I don't want to undervalue what you all did. You all termed yourselves. That doesn't happen very often, so I wanted to applaud you for that. Additionally, two other things I wanted to touch on are the Outreach Committee and then HR 4770. So as far as the Outreach Committee goes, as the chairman of the committee, there was a number of emails flying around over the last week and a half pertaining to Fiesta Bonita, and there was just some things I wanted to clear up. I sent this in email form, but just so I can publicly state a couple of these things that came out. And if I were you, when I initially read the first email that stated that we had a committee that spent their entire budget on a for-profit event so that they could make money, and it was voted on by people who were working at the company, I would have been fit to be tied, and I probably would have called me if I were you too. So, with that being said, let me clear the air on these issues. Number one, it's a city event, not a private event, so there was some misconception on whose event it actually was. Then there was the idea that there was a budget blown to the tune of $10,000 for the entire committee that was spent on the event. That couldn't be further from the truth. The committee had $0. There was an event that the committee adopted that had a budget of $10,000. So there is no way that that money could have been spent anywhere else, contrary to what other people may be saying. Additionally, the nonprofit is up to the company that's running the event. It's not up to the purview of the city. And this was something that was voted on in the beginning of the very first meeting that we had, and we decided that as opposed to making it a shoestring $10,000 budget, we were going to outsource it to the same company that ran it successfully for us the first year, and they're, as a result, going to spend over $50,000 on this event. So if you can think about $30,000 of that is just in marketing. So if you think about our contribution and their contribution, they are putting a lot at stake and putting a lot of manpower and hours into this, let alone the food waste, advertising, permitting, and all of the things associated with the event. None of that's falling on city staff. That's all on them. So that's how we got to that point. I'm sorry, that's how we got to that point with that. And last, regarding the conflict of interest, there's nobody on my committee who in any way, shape, or form is part of any conflict of interest. And you all can check with Audrey on this. They've signed forms that recuse themselves from any budgetary items that were voted on that had anything to do with their companies. So, with all that being said, I hope you all have a clearer vision of what actually went on at that meeting. Last, if I could, Mr. Mayor, HR 4770, you'll notice that is on your green sheet, and that is a House Resolution 4770 that's put forth by our Congressman Rooney, and it's legislation to make permanent the moratorium on offshore drilling in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. This legislation is home team legislation. Currently, they're in the process of trying to get home team players to be supportive of this in a public capacity, meaning that they could use your name, and that there could be something from the city saying that they're supportive of this measure, so that when inevitably this gets on a bill, it gets through. The moratorium on drilling in the Eastern Gulf was established in 2006, expires in 2022. Being a tourism-based economy and a real estate-based economy, protecting the Gulf, we're protecting our future, and we can be the first local municipality to get behind this legislation, and in order for this to get some traction, that would be beneficial in the process. So if you all would consider supporting HR 4770 as a body, we would very much appreciate it. Protect the Gulf and protect our future. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Other members of the public? Councilwoman Janet Martin, hello there.
Hi, good morning, Council. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for your service. I want to thank you again for your support of our Tree Advisory Board, and as you know, Arbor Day is coming up, so thank you very much for your support of that, and you'll be reading the proclamation today. Unfortunately, I can't stay. I have to go to work, but I wanted to thank you for that. And then I just wanted to say that I have concerns about the outsourcing. I don't know where else you're ever going to find employees that are so loyal to the residents and loyal to the visions that we all have for the city of Bonita Springs. I also don't know where you're going to find ones that don't have a conflict of interest. We want our employees to put the city first. So just wanted to say that. And then I wanted to say thank you to Carl and wish him the best and thank him for all the wonderful projects that I had the pleasure to work with him on. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Janet. Morning, John.
Mayor, Council, John West for the record. At the last meeting, I got up here and I spoke about the outsourcing project, and I said at the time it was a crazy idea, and I made my apologies for that remark, and I didn't realize that there are so many cities that are outsourcing or are said to be outsourcing. I am still against outsourcing. I think that here in Bonita we have a special city. I've lived here for over 30 years, and there's a togetherness here that outsourcing will kill. We have a staff here that has displayed, you may have complaints here and there, but on the whole, they've done a pretty good job in the 18 years that the city has been a city. And that's something to think about and not to be thrown away. The other thing is, I could say a lot more, but I'd like to see how the thing progresses. But personally, I'm against it. The idea of having 3 attorneys selected as a committee, I don't understand why there isn't somebody from the city on that committee. I don't see why there isn't an accountant on that committee. After all, there's something in there about cost effectiveness, and I don't think this should be left to just 3 attorneys. 3 attorneys is too much. There should be other people on there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Morning, Bonnie. How are you?
I'm great. How are all you folks? I'm Bonnie Whittemore, for the record. In a former life, I was a worldwide program manager for digital equipment, which became Compaq, which is now HP. And at the top of their list, everything was try to outsource. Now, I moved a factory one time from Nijmegen to Galway with all the international implications of that, and that was a total flop. We also, at Digital, tried to outsource the management to save money of our internal computer systems, and that was with EDS. You all have heard of EDS. Again, another flop. And if big people like that trying to do outsourcing flop, I really think we should talk about it, because I live in Bonita because I love it, and I love the way the town and the city works. So I would like to say a big fat no to considering outsourcing. You have too much talent to live here in this city.
Thank you, Bonnie. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Going, gone. Okay. Great. We're now going to move on to the consent agenda. Council, what's your preference there?
Move to approve.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve and a second. Further discussion?
Just to thank Matt particularly for the work on the Seminole Gulf. Just great job.
Okay. Council, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba? Aye.
Okay, now we're now going to move on to proclamations and presentations. If members of the Tree Advisory members, Susie Valentine, Ben Hershenson, Janet Martin, Jack Brown, Altony Lee, could come forward, please. Anybody else that might be here from the Tree Advisory Committee? That's right, Janet. Hey. Hello there. Hi.
We're wearing green. Where's your green tie?
I know it. It's right here. I'm holding it, yeah. Normally I hold a microphone, but I'll just bellow this out. This is a proclamation from the city of Bonita Springs, whereas Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is celebrated throughout the nation and the world as a special event to promote the planting of trees, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind, water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, watershed protection, and whereas the city of Bonita Springs appreciates the values, trees, as they are a renewable resource, beautify neighborhoods, increase property value, attract business and customers, make our community more attractive, functional, and livable, and whereas the city of Bonita Springs strongly encourages individuals and organizations to value trees and plants, appropriate species in appropriate places, and keep them properly maintained so that we may have large, beautiful shade trees in all parts of our community, and whereas the Bonita Springs community wishes to recognize the efforts of volunteers today participating in the celebration of Arbor Day here in our community park. Now, therefore, I, Peter Simmons, Mayor of the City of Bonita Springs, do hereby proclaim April 28, 2018 as Arbor Day in the City of Bonita Springs, and encourage all residents of Bonita Springs to plant and care for trees to ensure this precious natural resource for all generations to enjoy. Signed, Mayor Peter Simmons, April 18th, 2018. Thank you for your great work.
Thank you, Peter, for appreciating it.
There you go. Would you like to say a few words?
Janet asked me, she had to leave, and I'm the newest member of the Tree Advisory Board, and you all know me pretty well, and I'm very shy, and I'm a little bit nervous about speaking. But I'll tell you something, that was a great presentation. You could have given a lecture I used to give in botany about trees. I'm glad you had all that to say. I mean, really, with my background, undergraduate in botany, I can talk on trees, and if there's interest, I can talk for the next hour. Can I see a show of hands?
Yeah.
Well,
we'll give you 2 hours.
You got it. Just like my students they love to talk about trees. But anyway, thank you very much. You talked about Nebraska. They did plant, it was in 1885 that Arbor Day was started. Gentleman, I think the last name of Morton, if I recall correctly. So we hope you look forward to, it will attend on April 28th. From 10 to 1 p.m. downtown, and it's great fun for kids, adults. There'll be a lot of teaching going on, watching a tree get planted and so forth, a lot of displays, and also fun for the kids. So thank you very much for this, Peter, very much. And I'm happy to be on this committee. It's a great group of people. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Tony, got a few words to say, Susie? No, you're good?
No, I just appreciate the artwork around on the walls. We have a lot of trees represented. This is Florida. Good trees.
Nice, nice.
Thank you. Oh, picture. Oh, yes.
I was at an Arbor Day, Earth Day a number of years ago that REM played, and I was quite excited.
Next year's budget.
Yeah, next year's budget. Great, thank you. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for your great work, and looking forward to being part of that celebration. We're now going to move on to item B, which is a presentation by Alta on the West Terry Street project and design workshop. There is no green sheet on this, but Arlene will get this teed up for us. Hello.
Good morning. For the record, Arlene Hunter, Assistant City Manager. And on February 27th, 28th, and 29th, the city worked with Alta Design Group to host a series of workshops to gather public input in regards to multi-use pathways throughout the city, looking at designs, and most specifically the West Terry Street corridor. Today, they're going to be providing some recommendations, and staff will be seeking some direction from council at the conclusion of the presentation on specific projects so that we can keep our progress moving forward. Additionally, as you recall, we've committed community development block grants towards this purpose, and we'd like to keep that process moving, the design moving forward to look to conclusion of design work. Thank you. And with that, I'll introduce Brad Davis with Alta Design.
Great. Thank you, Arlene. Good morning.
Good morning. Brad Davis with Alta Planning and Design, and I'll say at the outset too, I also have Mike Reps and John Cato here with me as well. They're the engineers on the project, also with Alta Planning and Design. So this morning I'm going to give a quick overview of what we heard and what we've been doing, and then would be happy to answer any questions in more detail that you may have. In terms of the project scope, there are like 3 core elements that we are focusing on. We're calling one Design It, Build It, which is focusing on design of a portion of West Terry, roughly from the storage facility to Pine. And then we're also looking at designing of a pocket park, kind of roughly midway through the corridor at the entrance to the utility corridor. We are also developing kind of the look and feel, so we're documenting all of the kind of materials and design features so this can serve as a blueprint to move forward with future designs. And then the where do we go next, kind of how this project for West Terry fits into a larger vision for trails and connectivity in the community. As Arlene mentioned, we had a 3-day workshop at the end of February, beginning of March. We had great participation and enthusiasm from the community for the project. We got a lot of great input on West Harry, as well as kind of the look and feel and vision for how trails should feel and function in the community. Some of the key themes we took away are that not only there's interest in the trail along West Harry, but also having on-street bike lanes as well to create a safer condition for people recreationally riding. There's a desire to connect neighborhoods that are on the other side of 41 to West Harry. And there's also just a general interest in having safety improved along the corridor. So slowing cars down, making it easier to cross, and making it more comfortable for people to walk and bike along West Harry. So in terms of the where do we go next, this is part of a documentation of kind of the longer term strategy and phasing for West Harry. And I'll talk about just the portion that we're designing. But the idea is to, as a first phase, create this spine along West Harry from 41 all the way over to the other side of the interstate and connect all of the parks and schools and neighborhoods along that corridor to downtown as well. And then, as kind of longer term phases, considering some of the other things that have been discussed, such as a trail along the rail corridor or along 41, or some of the improvements along Bonita Beach Road, those just require more coordination, more time, more funding, and so this is just documenting that longer term vision so you can create a complete and connected network. For the portion that we're specifically looking at designing and we'll be talking about in detail today, it's the red line is the extent of the design, which I mentioned. The extents are roughly from the storage facility to Pine, and then the new park site is noted there in blue. So this is the condition today at the entrance to the utility corridor along West Harry. This is what it could potentially look like with just the construction of the trail. There would be the entrance to the park here. I have another example of what that would look like. But we found through this process that there's the potential with the amount of width that is out there now that with not too much additional construction that you could actually get in buffered bike lanes in both directions going east and west along the corridor. And at the end of the presentation, I'll talk about some of the cost considerations for that. And lastly, too, I would say just for this one, too, regardless of whether you move forward with just doing the trail or doing the trail and bike lane, we're designing it in such a way so that it could become, you can come back and do that at a later stage as well, setting the curb line where it would be. And this is in that location, what it might look like in a plan view. There's several locations where we've identified raised crossings that could serve as enhancements for crossings, that they also have the dual purpose of providing some traffic calming as well along the corridor. This is what the condition looks like currently in front of the school, and this is what that path could look like with the improvements. This is what it would look like in front of the entire entrance in front of the school. We have two crossings shown on either side of the school property. This is the park concept, and just briefly, some of the items that you're looking at and that we've developed. There's a plaza space. There's a pergola that would provide some shading and seating areas. There's some bike racks, and also some benches under the shade trees, and also an enhanced bus stop, and preserving utility vehicle access to the corridor as well. So this is currently what the park looks like now, and this is what it could potentially look like. And this rendering is showing the bike lane as well as the path. And this could also serve as a potential trailhead in the future, or this park could be, expanded on the back side as well for future phases to include more programming and amenities as well, which we heard some of that at the workshop. So lastly, as I mentioned, the costs, we're getting to kind of 30% design, and so we're starting to get a better sense of what would be required for construction based on what I showed you. And so for just the trail portion, we're looking at approximately $2.2 million for construction, and that would include the trail as well as the undergrounding of some of the stormwater utilities. Right now there's a swale out there and setting a curb where there's no curb now. And then there's also an option to underground the utilities, and that would be an additional $1.1 million to do that as well. And there are also, I should mention too, with the utilities, this corridor is scheduled for hardening of the utility poles, and that's programmed to happen sometime in the next 4 or 5 years. We've been talking to FPL about that. So there's an opportunity to coordinate with them on the construction of this project so that that could be coordinated close to or around the same time, so that either minimal or no kind of impacts between this project and when those would occur. And then there's also the opportunity for some credit back, the difference between just keeping the utility poles as they are and moving them and hardening them versus undergrounding. And then if we wanted to do the trail plus the roadway improvements, which would include the bike lane, that would be $2.7 million in construction, $1.1 million to underground, same as the other costs. And we include the $200,000 per million in resurfacing. So right now, you could just do from the center line north and reconstruct that. You wouldn't have to reconstruct the eastbound travel lane. But if you did that, you would have old roadway with new roadway, and so as an option, just kind of showing you what those cost differences are, to repave and remill the entire corridor and have it look all new all at once would be that additional $200K. And then lastly, looking at the park construction, we're looking at approximately $400,000 for that construction. So the main question we wanted to get answered with you all is whether to move forward from this point, designing the corridor with just the trail or the trail plus the bike lanes and roadway improvements. And we'll be working with staff moving forward to start to get into more of the detailed selections, materials, all those other things as well. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Nice presentation. Council? Amy?
I have a couple questions. When you, on the trail, if you don't do the bike lane, would bikers be on the trail also, or would it just be for pedestrians?
It's designed as a multi-use path, so the intent is that people walking and biking or other non-motorized
right, so
uses
it wouldn't
using
just,
it.
So, okay, so when you're talking about the roadway, you're talking about putting those bike lanes that you had shown there along the roadway in addition to the multi-use path. So you can totally separate the fast bikers and the walkers.
Right. So there's two different user groups that are a focus here, and we heard about those two different user groups and that they should both be accommodated. You can think of families or people that don't feel comfortable riding on the roadway using the trail, and then the recreational cyclists that are going much faster, that are out there already dealing with the current conditions. They have dedicated space with the on-street bike lanes.
And then, would this include covering the swale, or would it still be an open swale?
It would, on the north side of the road, it would be covered.
It would be covered, and then it would be. And finally, could you just explain why the beginning and the end of these trails, why you didn't start right at 41, and why didn't you go to Old 41? Is there an issue? Are there issues that need to be addressed?
Well, the complexity, even though it's a very short stretch, it's a very complex portion, and so we just decided to there's also a grant that you've all received for the trail construction that uses the same boundaries that we're using. So between the funding for the grant funding for the trail and the complexity of that end of the corridor, that's why I
So
would
it's
say-
not impossible to extend it, it's just that it'd be a lot harder and a lot more expensive at this point, and we wouldn't get our demonstration project.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. I think that's it. Thank you. Great presentation.
Great, thank you. Greg?
Does Arlene have something to say?
I was just going to add, there's also some traffic considerations, especially on the most western portion of the trail that may affect US 41. So those were things that we wanted to keep the project moving forward, and that could be maybe another phase along the way.
Okay.
Arlene, while you're there, on the grant part of it, is there a 50-50 grant, 60-40, or?
So council had suggested that we would commit, when we have previously committed our community development block grant, not the disaster recovery grant.
Right.
So our uncommitted funds, if you include, and I'm going to bring up an item under city manager items today, the 2018 funds, you have approximately $545 in uncommitted or in discussed for infrastructure projects through community development block grant process. And then you also have funding in the general fund for multi-use pathways as well.
And then we have the 200,000 from the
And we have
state.
200,000 from the state for the trail funds on
That's
top
what
of
I'm looking at. I mean, if we're gonna do this, great presentation, by the way, thank you very much. I think we should do it all at once, instead of, piecing it out 2 years from now, hey, let's add this, because we may end up with a whole new set of issues at that point. So right now, we know what the issues are. I think we go the whole way, and some of it goes back to Audrey about using impact fees also. Since we're going to be making it a little bit wider with the multi-use, can we use impact fees to offset any shortfall that we may have, so we don't have to, pull it from somewhere else?
And impact fees, both park impact fees have bike lanes and trailways. Obviously, if it's part of a road or capacity of road, it's another issue, and you could then use road impact fees. But I would say use legally available revenue, because there could be multiple revenue sources.
Okay. No, I think it's great. My opinion is let's do all three of them, the bike, trail, and the park all at once.
And I just want to remind council that when we acquired the property as a donation, which was great, one, it has naming issues with the donation, but also I just want to make sure the consultant's aware that we will have to, whatever is built in the park has to comply with the FP&L requirements for the FP&L easement. In other words, so we have everything properly grounded and designed.
Right, yeah, and we've already been talking to them about the requirements for, clearance with the utility lines and access to the utility corridor, which I mentioned.
There'll be a separate agreement that will have to come to council, but that will be after design. You couldn't do anything until we knew what design was.
Okay, thanks, Audrey.
That's it.
Greg,
Thank
you're
you,
good?
sir.
Laura?
Great presentation, and I agree with Greg. We should just do it all at once, and because then it's less of an impact on the neighborhood and everybody traveling down that corridor. So, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Pete?
Oh, Brad, thank you. Great presentation. Just wanted to talk a little bit more about the power lines. And we've talked some about that, and with Matt and Arlene as well. I think so the number up there is an additional $1.1 million. It seems to me that if they're going to harden that in a few years' time, and then we have issues of where those hardened concrete poles go, that it would be good if we could dig in a little more, so to speak, with FP&L. And I know they can tend to be somewhat bureaucratic from time to time, so be it. But try to convince them that if they're going to do it, it's going to cost them money anyhow. Maybe somehow, guys, maybe you can move this up and underground it, and maybe get a credit for the cost of poles and stuff like that. I mean, it's sure worth the try as far as I'm concerned, because this is going to be obviously a beautiful corridor, which is what we wanted. Safe for the road bikers, safe for the recreational bikers. But if we can somehow more cost efficiently get those power poles down, I think that would make it even better.
And we've talked to them about that process, and it would just be kind of ongoing discussion with them as the design gets refined.
Yeah, 'cause the ground's going to be open, when we're doing this work, so, thank you.
Great, thanks. Mike?
Thank you for the presentation. Very good job. I agree with Greg and Peter. I think we should do it all at once, especially adding the bike lanes on the road, because not everybody wants to be up on the path, and the people on the path definitely don't want some of us faster riders on the path with them. So, the other thing, so you'd mentioned underground utilities in the figure, but I guess that was just the stormwater. Swale is included in the first price, and then the 1.1 is just to do the electric after. Okay. Yeah, I agree with Peter that something we should look into. Like you said, that they, do have a cost to harden it. We might as well hopefully get a credit for that if we go ahead with the underground.
Thanks, Mike. Fred?
Yeah, great presentation. In the public comment, there was some mention made about taking some of the areas where we would create crosswalks and doing them early on a temporary basis. I'd like you at least to think about that. That seemed to make a lot of sense to me. And again, we must all be thinking alike, because when you said they're going to harden it, there's no way that's not going to cost a lot of money. Now, there is a word of caution, and that is they may tend to leave their poles so that Comcast and these people that put the cell phone little boosters on poles have got something to hang it on, and they actually get paid a revenue for that. So if we do decide to underground, we want to make it clear that none of that can happen, because if it does, you're defeating a large part of what you're spending a lot of money for. One thing I wanted to bring up, that is, you made the comment the sidewalk would run across the interstate, and I guess that's where it'll terminate in this phase.
No, sorry. That would be for future phases. The vision is to continue the trail along the north side of the roadway.
Well, I
all
think
along the corridor.
Matt and I talked to you, but when you cross the interstate, we got to have the sidewalk and the trail has got to shift to the south side.
To connect to the YMCA.
Because of that huge swale,
right,
yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll cost an arm and a leg and a lot of money to keep it over on the other side. So we ought to think of a way of establishing a good crossing for those that are on the north sidewalk to get over to the south, either before we cross over the interstate or right afterwards. So that's my
Well,
comment.
it actually may be at Imperial.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even Old 41, because there's a south,
Yeah.
there's a south sidewalk now on
Yeah.
Old
And
41.
you probably want to have more than one, because people cross over sometimes because they got friends that live on the south side and they're on the north side. I mean, there's all kind of reasons people cross over besides the fact that it's a crosswalk, But I think you've done a great job and look forward to seeing this. And I think what I got, counting my voice, is let's do the whole thing.
And I would just echo, I think it's, sometimes it's hard, especially when it comes to money, to rip the Band-Aid all off at once. But as we know, we've all been there as kids. You just rip it off and it's over with, right? And the pain is gone and you absorb it. And I think certainly as we work through budget season this summer, we will get that figured out. And I applaud your efforts. Hearing what you've heard up here, do you have any other comments or suggestions based on what you've heard up here? Or?
No, I mean, this was just the big decision point, and we can move forward and work with staff on next steps with what we've heard today.
Mayor?
Okay.
May I just make one
Yep.
more comment? There was a concern raised about crosswalks. Could I just ask you to look at where potential crosswalks would be, and to be certain that we have at least demarcated areas that would add to the safety of our pedestrians and stuff, not only in the area we're working on, but all along, because, we could just paint this crosswalks initially until we get enough money to do it the proper way. So take another look, because there seems to be some concern about it.
I just want to note, too, that since the workshop, we have updated it and added crosswalk locations.
Okay, so that you feel comfortable with that, and we can feel comfortable that we're building a safe trail. Thank you.
Council, in reporting back to the agencies providing the grant funds, would it be possible for us to have a affirmative vote on the direction moving forward, so we can provide them with progress reports?
Sure,
I make that
absolutely.
motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Arlene or Carl, on the budget, so we have the 600,000 to 200,000, and then we have 2 million in the budget.
2 million in
An
the general
additional
fund.
2 million in the budget right now
General fund.
for
Multi-use pathways,
multi-use paths.
citywide.
So
Now, part of that funding is the Alta study is part of that
Understood.
process.
Yeah. Thank you.
For the dog days of July, when we sit here and grind it out, right, on the budget.
Well, that's done. I mean, that's.
Yeah,
we're done.
well, and some further discussion. So great. Okay, now item C, we have an errata sheet on Logan Boulevard presentation.
Morning, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Morning.
If you remember back, we had discussed the possibility of providing a lot of those aspects we just discussed along Terry into the design of Logan Boulevard. A brief history, Logan is required by Funeral Homes to come back into Bonita Springs to handle their traffic from Collier County. Originally, they had a development order that was approved that showed a simple 2-lane road with open swales on both sides and a stop sign at the intersection of Bonita Beach Road. It was the instruction of council for us to sit down with GL Homes to discuss the possibility of including a lot of multimodal aspects into this roadway and also to make it a more attractive and functional roadway with the idea of a roundabout at the intersection of Bonita Beach Road. What we have done is, if you look in your errata sheet, there is a memo from GL Homes. This was prepared by them. It was not done in conjunction with your city staff, but it does provide a pretty accurate representation of the order of events, and it provides their perspective on how they see things going. And because it provided a pretty good history, we decided to include that in your packets. Now, there are 3 11x17 sheets included. The first is a breakdown of cost, and it includes overall cost, city costs, and GL Homes cost. The second page is the engineered design for the roundabout. GL Homes has hired David Plummer and Associates to provide that design. And the third page is a cross-section. This is generally how we see this roadway proceeding. So, cutting to the chase, if you look at the first page, 11x17, it shows, if you add several of the columns, both the city column and also the column underneath drainage costs, it adds up to somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.9 million. And so this is potentially the amount the city could be required to contribute in some form or fashion, whether it be through impact fee credits, cash, etc. That will include, on the second page, the roundabout. Now, the roundabout was something that had concerns on both the Lee County Department of Transportation and the consultants at first, and the more they began to look at the situation, look at the traffic numbers, and then design the intersection, they realized that it could function. And that functional design is what you see before you today. The third page goes into a lot of the aspects that you discussed before, but it also handles a stormwater function, and I'll hit that first. The stormwater function was one of the aspects we had gone into with the Jim Beaver study. And if you remember, what Jim Beaver had talked about was restoring natural flowways, had talked about the possibility of moving water away from the Imperial River watershed and going back to where they should be, or where they were historically. This is one of those opportunities. So when you look at this, the area that's labeled as drainage conveyance, that will help move water to the south. Now, under the current plans, that water will stop, or this conveyance will stop prior to the Collier County line, because to take it into Collier County will require a permit not only from the Water Management District, but also the Army Corps of Engineers with agreement from Collier County, because it is their facilities which we would drain. So under the current plans, this drainage conveyance helps us construct the roadway, but it also handles a certain amount of water, and hopefully at some point in the future that water will be conveyed into Collier County and eventually into the Gulf. If you look at the roadway design, there are a couple of key features here that we're pretty excited about. One is the road is no longer just a 2-lane road It is a 2-lane divided roadway. So there's an 8-foot median in between those 2 lanes. It is, all the drainage for this road is handled underground. The gutters on either side will drain to inlets, which will then drain eventually into either San Remo or into Palmyra. Those locations for the outfall has already been established, and they will simply tie into those existing locations. Excuse me. And then on each lane, you will notice there is a small but somewhat visible 4-foot additional section of asphalt. That could be used for cyclists, or it could just be used for breakdown lane, etc. It provides you options. And then the multi-use path that you will see on the furthest left portion, or the western portion of the site, has been increased. Current standards call for an 8-foot wide path. We were able to work with GL Homes to increase that to a 10-foot wide path. The reason why that's important is because that was one of the areas that you had wished to increase. It is not necessarily within your standards currently, but is within your desires. And so we were able to have that included within this plan. I just wanted to provide you a little bit of an outline. I know I've had several discussions to go through the broad strokes of this with several of you. GL Homes is here, and they are ready to answer questions of detail or of anything that is above my understanding. So are there any questions on the general concept and design, or if not, I'd be happy to turn this over to them.
Fred?
Yeah, 2 things. Yesterday in the little discussion I had with you all, you indicated that if we were going to make this other than the original road design, the 2-lane undivided highway and all that, that this cost is pretty well what it would be. But also, one other thing that I think is important, even though you're using the digging out of that land that the city acquired from Village Walk to create a potential flowway, you need to do it anyway because you need fill dirt to raise the road. And in fact, I asked Matt Feeney, I'm asking you to confirm my comment. I asked Matt Feeney yesterday, did it break, are we even, Stephen, what we take out is what we need? Are we paying to haul dirt away? And he said, no, we were still going to pay money to haul dirt in. So
that is correct.
To create that flowway is actually to our benefit, because if we didn't create it, we'd have to bring in dirt from someplace else.
That is correct, and in fact, I would highly recommend, regardless, and I know that it will be probably a few years before there is any possibility of connecting this water into Collier County, but without the construction of that drainage conveyance, the cost of this road increases significantly, because all of the fill that would be used to fill this roadway needs to be imported at this point. And the difference in cost between what we're able to scavenge from this drainage conveyance versus what needs to be imported is significant. I think it's over $10 a yard.
And one last thing, even though you've correctly said we can't send water down there now, in an emergency, we can.
Well, that would not be a decision that we would make,
No,
but it would
that's
be a
South
decision
Florida Water
that the
Management.
district could consider. Yes, sir.
But they can do it in an emergency.
They can do a lot of things.
Yeah, they already did.
I guess I would just add, and assuming I do have a call at 1 o'clock with South Florida Water Management at 1 o'clock today, so I'll just kind of add that to the discussion, if you will, of items that we're talking about. Wouldn't want you to speculate, but do you have any thoughts on, look, we know what we all went through on this hurricane. We know what we go through in rainy season, where we just talked about the bike path, spending money. I don't see any way around us sending water south if that goal is obtainable. I understand about the fill dirt. I understand about the costs, and those are always a concern. But when we're looking at what we just looked at, 4 or 5 feet of standing water for weeks, Mother Nature always wanted that water to go south, and then we built Bonita Beach Road East, right? So to that end, I think you know where I'm going here. I think somehow, some way, we need to get that figured out. And of course, we need to have several discussions with several people to allow that permitting and to allow with Collier County and others. But your thoughts there, John?
My thought is that We have been working with several members of the Water Management District, including Rick Barber. He was kind enough to help set up a meeting with several members of the Collier County staff who have been very cooperative with this issue so far. However, they did convey that their residents have the same concerns that our residents do. In an emergency event, a lot of water flows through their canals. Now, eventually this would wind up along the canal on the north side of Immokalee Road. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with the location and the size of that. That canal is owned by Collier County. It is managed by the Water Management District. So those are two key partners that we would have to work with in order to make sure that this water, when it flows south, how it would be handled and under what conditions. So I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, it does need to be done. And the Water Management District seems to be in favor of having this work, if at all possible. They are, in fact, in the process of modeling how this would work. We have not seen the results of that modeling. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with that, but when we have something, obviously we'll share it with you. But this is something, this conveyance, or at least our portion of it, is something that we would highly recommend doing in this initial phase. And just as an aside, but as a heads up, there are portions of this conveyance which may be eligible for you to issue impact fee credits for. There also may be portions of it that you may not be able to issue impact fee credits for. And what I would specifically draw your attention to would be either the pipes or the box culverts that would be going underneath Bonita Beach Road. Those have been estimated at somewhere in the neighborhood of $480,000, so let's just say $500,000 in round numbers. You could be responsible for in some other form of contribution. So I bring that to your attention so that you know that it is something that you will possibly have to address, but it is a portion of this project that we highly recommend you do in the first phase. If it is not done in the first phase, I don't see how it is realistic to go back and do in later phases.
Right.
Is
Go ahead, Laura, I'm sorry.
Is there any possibility of getting grants?
There's always possibilities of grants, but the problem with grants is they're usually written by somebody with a specific focus or target. And if we fall within that target, then that lines up very well and there is no issues. However, there is no guarantee that there will be a grant issued for this specific type of project, but I would not rule it out. I would also not rule out the possibility of a possible contribution from other agencies or entities, but those would be later on, probably after a permit was issued to bring the water into Collier County.
Mm-hmm. Fred, I know you had another question.
Well, no, I want to make two comments. Number one, I believe...
Comments, questions,
comments,
whatever they might be.
Whatever, to facilitate. I believe, didn't we put this project in some fashion or another in the thing that went to the county?
It was placed in the HMGP priority projects
Right.
with Lee County.
So there is a possibility we may get money there. The other thing is, because we are putting those box culverts in, which benefits South Florida Water Management, because much of that land on the north is their land, they may decide to contribute, and you might, that could be a point of discussion. And the last thing is, if we don't have a flood, permanently being able to send that water south isn't that big a deal, because the Imperial River can use water to keep it up in the drier seasons anyway. It's not, you don't absolutely have to have that permanent solution. That's what I'm trying to get across. It would be nice if we got it, but you may not want to send it all that way all the time anyway. So you can do both things. That's it.
Okay.
And I think the modeling will reflect what needs to.
Amy?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments from our discussions with the staff yesterday. One of the issues that we need to address here, and I'm in favor of doing this, is that the reason why we have sort of a timeliness of this is because the developer is under a clock to get their portion done. And some of the expense that we're looking at here today is because we, in our planning, and which I'm also in favor of, have moved this designed or road from the 75-foot area that's closest to, what's that?
Palmyra and San Diego.
Palmyra. And we have acquired the land on the other side, and we're going to put it up the middle. And some of this, dig up the dirt and put it into the other area, is because in the original design, the land was more level, and you didn't have to do as much moving around. Where we're moving it, the land is irregular, so it requires a lot more fill. And so that's why there's an added expense. And my understanding about a lot of these grants, that once you do the project, it's harder, much more difficult to get it in retrospect than to, most of these grants you have to wait to get permission and then you start. I'm not in favor of waiting at all here. I do think, Mayor, since you're going to be talking to South Florida Water Management, and something I've been saying all along, that this is, in my view, at their door, and this is where we should put a lot of political action, and thank you for talking to them. And the notion that we're trying to do is restore the flow, and that should be our mantra going forward whenever we talk about. So thank you for that work you're doing, and remind them that they have a responsibility here and that we're trying to restore the flow. We go through with it. We'll try to find the money where we can. And in fact, the bonus of getting a bike lane there is just remarkable, because we can translate some of the work that Alta is just presenting to us and incorporate certain things. And we also know that this is not the end of it, even with this expense, because there's landscaping and I understand lighting, which we don't even have a number for. So, but these are sequential projects, and maybe we can get grants for that kind of stuff. But we're looking at spending the money here, and I'm in favor of it, so.
Thank you.
Just,
Peter?
yeah, I'm in favor of it as well, but on the money, my question is, where are we on that? Leaving aside all the talk about the Water Management District, which obviously I agree with. So this is not budgeted, or is it budgeted, or?
What has been previously discussed, and it has only been at the level of discussion, so there's been no official action taken. But the idea was we would work mainly through impact fee credits for roads for the city's contribution of this. Now, I know that there is a concern on GL Homes' part that anything above and beyond the minimum standards is not borne by them. I have not heard really any concerns, and they are perfectly capable of speaking for themselves, but I have not heard any concerns about other forms of contributions or payment. So the general idea that we would handle as much of this as we could through impact fee credits, and then whatever was left for us to handle would be a discussion for you to figure out how you would like to do that.
Carl, is it?
Yeah, that's my assessment as well. We've taken a look at this. We believe the vast majority of this $2.9 million number would be road impact fee credits. Obviously something that is very particular to drainage, which would certainly be the culverts under Beach Road. Though that will have to be borne by some other funding source, but we can put all that together.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great, thanks, Carl.
And so to kind of move ahead, I know that GL Homes would like to speak as well, but before they come up here, what we're really looking to do today is to have council review the information provided to you, both the financial and the general design guidelines, and to determine whether this is a path you want to pursue. Because what you would be authorizing today is for them to pursue plans to go to 100% design plans, basically construction documents, and then to go ahead, bid that document, and start construction. They are under an obligation to start their construction by June. They are also under an obligation to finish that construction within a year. Now, those dates, if we need to discuss these dates with Collier County, we can. If we don't have to, it's usually best to reserve our discussions for important items that we would rather focus our attention. But if those things need to be done, they can be done. However, under the current regulations, the sooner the better.
I'd also like to add, Mayor and Council, that just a reminder that the folks from Village Walk who were so good to donate this property to us, we have an obligation to touch base with them and let them know how things are going at 60% plans.
Right, right.
And we will be doing that.
Right. And John, I guess I would only ask, and I want to give them an answer, and we intend to give them an answer, but any of the moving pieces or parts, in the interest of time, I know they need an answer. I go back to saying that, but is there anything out there hanging around that we should clear up before we do give them an answer?
There are things that I would love to have an answer to right now, but I just don't think that that will be possible. I would love to know how we will be able to handle the water long term. I would love to know how our relationship with Collier is going to work out in several items, but those things are going to be discussions that we have as we go forward. And unfortunately, based upon, even if we were to delay the date of construction and everyone would be agreeable with that, I think that some of these permits, because of the number of agencies and the number of entities that are involved, we're looking at a period of years.
So let me ask it a different way, and that was a good answer to probably my vague question. But I'll just throw it out there, and it's probably not a pleasant subject, but in the interest of them, of 951, the folks that want to extend it north of Bonita Beach Road, through the DRGR, wherever they want to go, and get it up to Daniels or Colonial or wherever, however, that has to be part of this discussion, negotiation, whatever we want to call it here. So I would hate to go along in the interest of time to give somebody an answer when they're going to hold us hostage on sending the water south and still want to negotiate with us to send the road further north.
The idea of 951 was brought up by the Collier County staff because they felt that their commission had an interest in seeing that eventually constructed at some point in the future. The question is bigger than Bonita Springs and Collier County.
Absolutely.
So even if the two of those, you as a council and them as a commission, were in perfect agreement, the road would not be constructed until the MPO, the Department of Transportation. There was a number of other entities, Village of Estero, depending on the alignment, would have to come to the table and agree before any plan was even shown on the long-range map. 951, if you remember, was originally shown, was very contentious, had 3 possible alternative locations. All of those locations were removed off the long-range map. There is no 951 that heads north. I know that there's been discussions on it from several people in the background, but nothing has been in the public enough to put on a map or to discuss a possible design alternative. So I know that the Collier County is very interested in that, and the idea of interconnection is something that you as a council are interested in. However, for this particular roadway, there are a number of entities, there are a number of questions, and there are a number of flat-out problems that need to be addressed before anybody gets this even written on a piece of paper.
Which is, to my point exactly, Carl, and please, yeah, your comments?
Well, I just wanted to add to John's comments that, again, we had a joint meeting with the district and Collier County representatives that was raised.
Right.
751 was raised. And clearly, the district has had a consistent stance that this corridor is going to be important for water flow. And so while they manage the system down there, Collier County folks were interested in working with us, understanding the need of moving water through the system.
Right.
When 751 was brought up, we made it very clear that there is no appetite here for 751 heading north. So they did not get upset by that. They probably weren't surprised by that. But the subject has been talked about.
Right. And that's my bigger point here. I want to get you folks an answer. Believe me, I do. But and it's part of the discussion that Carl and I had last week when we met with South Florida Water Management District. And, I am, for those that know me well, I am the last person in the world to pretend to be an expert on the details of this type of stuff. But when I look at the entire football field or the entire baseball diamond, it seems like at times we have to hurry up and hit a single, wait at first base to try to get to second base. I'd like to look at the entire, and I know that's difficult because there's a lot of things going on and a lot of moving pieces, but I feel like we hurry up to do things. Here's a date, here, and we're putting a Band-Aid on something, or we're ripping a Band-Aid off of something, rather than performing the whole surgery that the water we can solve for Estero, Fort Myers, Lee County, Collier County, South Florida Water Management, Caloosahatchee, you name it, Lake Okeechobee, where I'm tired of hitting singles. I want to look at the whole field and have a strategy, and I know that's hard, so I'm not under any illusions, but that will be part of my discussion and has been certainly part of the discussion Carl and I had with South Florida the other day, Management District. Why can't we just buy into a regional approach? The water comes from everywhere. We're a repository for the water from 50% of the state of Florida, or whatever the number is. I'm probably not saying it very well, but when we're looking at major problems, major solutions, major issues, and I don't want to belabor this or be difficult, but is this a hurry-up fix? Is this a bunt single, or what is this, John?
I think this is a step along the path.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is you've already had a study that has outlined for you just what you identified, the whole field. This is the city, this is where the water's going, this is where it should be going. It did not have the details of how that'd be implemented, but it had the locations of where it needs to go. And part of that was this area. And as part of the discussion on permitting this water to go south, I think that we would be foolish, or we would miss an opportunity if we only focused upon this corridor. You have several areas where there has been an attempt made to move water south out east. It has been through the areas out by what is now Bonita National and what will be Valencia with Geo Homes' project, and also along this roadway. So there are alternatives, and this does handle a section of that overall plan. So I agree with you. It's almost a two-stage approach. You plan for your priorities and your desires, and also, as Donald Rumsfeld said, you don't go to war with the army you want, you go to the war with the army you have.
Right.
This is what we are getting that's presented to us. So I look at this as an opportunity to implement a portion of what you had already commissioned through Jim Beaver.
Go ahead.
Right,
Yes,
Mayor,
Carl,
real quick.
please.
Just to follow up to that, too. Before Irma, this was going to be a road, and it was going to be the kind of road we would like to see constructed in the city in the future, multimodal. After Irma, we happen to have the land that's not only going to help build the road, but also move water. And we see this, as John indicated, we see this as one of the tools, one of the steps, one of the projects of many that still need to be completed throughout the city to address the issue of trying to mitigate future flooding. And we think the opportunity is now, and we have a partner, if you want to call them that, in GL Homes, and to try to make this happen so the city's not having to bear the entire cost of this improvement.
Right. And I'll just beat a dead horse a little bit further, and then I'll be quiet. Let's assume, and I assume we're probably going to go forward with this, but let's say, okay, we'll plan, we'll take the backfill, we'll take the dirt, we'll take the loam, we'll dig it out, we'll dredge it, we'll do what we have to do to get it ready for water. We obviously still don't have the green light to send the water south. What if we do all this, spend the extra money? It's a little bit of a crapshoot here, right? Until we get the green light to send the water south. We're going to prepare to send the water south, but what if that answer ultimately is no?
The worst, if you were to construct the road as this plan is showing, the worst case scenario is you have the increased capacity for this drainage ditch, and you have the water that moves off of Beach Road going south. Councilman Forbes hit on the possibility, and it is a possibility because it is not within our purview or authority. The Water Management District, under emergency situations, could take that terminus of the drainage conveyance and move it south on their own. But that is not up to us, and that is up to them. However, the water is further south at that point compared to where it was during Irma, where we had to send it down from Beach Road.
Right.
So there are advantages to having this conveyance there. At a minimum, you have increased capacity for what that conveyance holds, just in and of itself.
Yeah.
And secondly, you get it off of Bonita Beach Road, where it had been previously flowing into the Imperial River. So you've diverted a pretty good amount of water, not as much as you would like or as much as we will possibly expect to see, but more than is being diverted today.
Right.
That's why I say it's simply a piece.
Right. Peter?
Yeah, I have 2 points. One is following up on Amy and Peter. Really, on the leverage point, now is the time to get the Water Management District to step up and help pay for this. Not just the need, because of the point that Amy made about we do it, and then, in 2 years' time, they say, well, you already spent the money, thanks a lot, see ya. Right, so there couldn't be anything more important than a 1 o'clock call or whatever it is, and following up on that. Second thing is, there's 951 and there's 951. So you're talking about north through what is now Edison Farms, and highly unlikely to happen. But where is Collier with respect to the stretch from Immokalee Road to the bottom of what we call Logan, which is in Collier County? And what leverage do we have with respect to that, kind of similar to your point, if any?
And I'll call it an off-the-cuff comment because it just sounded as it was part of the
Right.
discussion. There could possibly be a connection that comes north of Immokalee Road that would connect south of the county line. So it would be within
Well,
Collier
that's
County.
been on their map for, that's not, I mean,
And so,
for
and that was
dec-
any possible connection to this roadway. That was the extent.
yeah. Because they're not really interested in having Bonita Springs be the end of, like, the road sewer pipe for a county that's building and building. I love those guys, but building and building and building.
We kind of talked about the macro level.
Right. Well, that's,
The bottom line micro level is you are looking at a cross section that if you were to convert it from a 2-lane road as you see it before you today to a 4-lane road that would be able to accommodate that traffic and to still accommodate that drainage would be a very costly transition. And I have not heard any interest from this council in contributing towards making a change in that direction.
no, understood. I'm not asking about, I know what the council is. I'm asking about Collier County.
Well, I think that you would have to work with, there would have to be the two of you working together to handle that, because obviously if you connected 951 to this roadway, the anticipated traffic that we have looked at for this design
Right.
would no longer be adequate.
Exactly.
Because it would be a significantly
my
higher
point,
number.
yeah.
And it would have to be completely redesigned
Right.
to accommodate that.
Okay, that's, all right, got it. Thank you.
Council, Greg?
I just got a couple comments or questions. Since we don't know where we're getting the money, we don't know if South Florida Water Management's going to do this, especially with the box culvert, which we're talking is $500,000.
Don't know if we can send the water south.
Well, even with sending
Right,
it
right.
south, it's going to go south and it's going to tee there, and that's where it's going to end up being. And like Councilman Forbes says, in an emergency, someone's got the key to the dike. Someone's got the key to it, and they'll open it somewhere.
That's what happened in the hurricane.
And that's what happened in the hurricane. So with that being said, I'm just throwing it out there, and it may be may not be a good thing, but this roundabout's $300,000-$400,000 where a light is.
Actually,
What's the difference on that?
It's about
John?
700,000 and change, the difference between the traffic signal and the roundabout.
So I'm saying if we don't know, if your 1 o'clock call comes, and I know GL wants their, design and all that, that pays for the box culvert underneath it, just by getting rid of the roundabout. And again, with not knowing what Collier County is going to do in the future, with 951 coming through, as John has stated, this design can only handle the trip counts that we have today. If for some reason they do that, some of that trip count is based on this roundabout, not on a stop sign.
It's not just today, but it's what they anticipate in the future, but just without a connection of 951, as Councilman O'Flynn.
So I'm just looking at, saving money somehow. We all like the roundabouts. I don't even know if the people out east of town knows about the roundabout. They
They know
may have
about
heard it. But, we're talking a savings of money that we can pay for this box culvert that we really want, that we think that we need.
Right.
And it's going to help with the conveyance of water to the south.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
I think it's a good.
I'm sorry,
No,
Greg.
thank you, Greg.
I'm sorry, Greg,
Amy.
but I don't agree with going down that direction. I think if we want to, we have money to do this. We even have money in our multimodal path to take care of the bike portion of that. I do think the responsibility, as I said several times, is with South Florida Water Management. But I'm not in favor of degrading the quality of this road. We have the opportunity to make a statement which reflects the Bonita Beach Vision Study, and we're not going to have it again, in my opinion, and I'm not in favor of a traffic light. I think it changes the whole complexion of that community out there, Village Walk, all those people. I mean, I think it'd be such an asset to that eastern part of Bonita Springs. So I'm not in favor of saving $700,000. We'll try to find it somewhere. Carl is the finance guy, so he'll tell us how we do it. If we could do it with impact fees, they'll figure it out. And whatever that total number is, it's so hard because we have so many financial needs. But again, for a topic I'm going to talk about later, one of the tasks that I think we need to do is review the whole financial picture, where we put all these things in perspective, so we know where we can spend the money, where we can't spend the money, what time frame we're going to have in the future. But I'm not in favor of changing that to a stoplight at all. I'm sorry.
And just
I
as
agree.
a quick
I
point of
agree.
reference, and it's a small point of reference, but your agreement with Village Walk was part of the dedication of the 125 feet includes the design aspect of a roundabout. So
Right.
not impossible to change
Right.
if you so choose, but our agreement currently says that we will go after a roundabout.
Council, anything before we hear from GL Homes? Fred?
Oh, no, I was just gonna make a
Questions,
motion.
comments? It doesn't?
Yeah.
All right, miscellaneous, okay. Wonderful. GL Homes, thanks, John, very good.
Thank you, John.
Doug,
Mr. Mayor and Council, good morning.
Pete, do you
Don,
got-
Don, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why are we hearing from GL? I mean, happy to talk. We have a long agenda here today. I think we've heard, I mean, what's going to be added?
That's a good point. John Asher with me today, one of the representatives of GL.
With all
was
respect.
Oh, I completely agree. And we've been talking about maybe we need to cut it down some. It was mainly going to be going into the numbers and.
But he's done that already. I mean, with all respect, I'd just as soon cut it down to, like, thank you.
Ditto.
I mean, yeah.
Ditto, yeah, right, like
I don't
Ghost.
have any questions. I mean, their number's their number, and that's
Yeah,
what
I
it's
mean-
going to
Can you
be.
do it less expensively?
Yeah,
That's all I
right.
want to hear.
Can we beat you up on price?
If you can do that, we'll be very happy.
Trying. Thank you for allowing us to be here. My name is Don Thompson, for the record, with Henderson Franklin. The representatives of my client here today are John Asher and Bill Fenno, and we appreciate the good discussion that you all had today. And unless you have any questions or comments,
Council?
we're good with that.
We're good.
I make a motion that we move forward with this
Second.
as proposed.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, just
Yes,
so you
John.
know, there are several items that we've touched on that will need further discussion. We plan on bringing them back to you as they are
Sure.
needed in the future.
Yeah,
So
no,
this
John,
is-
and you and Matt and Carl and everybody, Arlene, have done a great job on this. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts. Keep up the great work and look, engage this council. If we need to get down to Collier for any of those meetings or we need to go wherever, Tallahassee, Orlando, engage us. That's what we're here for.
Yes, sir, you will all be busy.
Yeah, okay. Dynamite. Yes, Laura.
I just wanted to say, John, thank you to Matt, John, and Stuart for meeting with me yesterday. Very informative.
Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Thank you.
I'm sure Laura taught you a few things yesterday, John, so that's wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Okay. We are now moving on to item D, review the architectural design
Are you going to recluse yourself?
of Chicky Hut accessory structure. Cheeky? Chicky? Cheeky. Sorry about that. Hut accessory structure prior to approval of the local development order consistent with condition 9 of zoning ordinance number 16-06 for Fire Station 27 located at Hickory Boulevard. This is green sheet 18-04-0090. Rock and roll Mike Fegon is here to tee this up. Hello, Mike.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Happy to be with you this morning. Just give you a quick synopsis. There was a variance that was approved by this council in 2016 for a fire station to go out on Hickory Island. There were 14 conditions tied to that variance. One of the conditions, condition 9, had to deal with an accessory structure or a cheeky hut design that was going to be used to house a fire truck and keep it out of the sun and out of the inclement weather. At the time of the variance, there were 3 designs that were proposed. There was this one here, 2, and that one. So 1, 2, and 3 were proposed back in 2016. At the time of the presentation of the variance, there wasn't a consensus from council on which design was a preference. So an additional condition was added to that variance ordinance that said, well, before you do get to that point where you want to construct your cheeky hut or accessory structure, bring back the available alternatives to council for follow-up discussion. Since that time, there has been a 4th option that has come up, which is this one right here. We do have Sam Vincent, the city architect, here to discuss all 4 options with you if you'd like, but that about sums up the purpose of why we're here today.
No, I appreciate it. And Chief, could I ask you, what are your thoughts here? Rather than drill down on DeWitt, I'll drill down on you a little bit, buddy. What are your thoughts here, Chief?
Well, I brought all three of these designs to the fire board, and they only authorized me to move forward with the Cheeky Hut. And the reason why was they are aware of several different structures. I think there's about 9 that we took pictures of from the roadway that are similar to the Cheeky Hut. Now that building right there, even though we have a 99-year lease on that building was only appraised at $153,000. And we could not improve the building more than 50% when we put the firefighters in there, or else we would have to bring it up to code. So when you look at the cost, when the board looked at the cost of this particular rendering, which is obviously a very nice piece, it didn't make sense to the board to move forward with that because of the cost of it associated. So they authorized me to move forward with the Cheeky Hut should the council agree.
Okay. Because, yeah, I agree. That does look nice.
Joe, is your lease is on part of the building or the whole building?
Just only on part. Yeah, we do have first right of refusal should they decide to sell, at which point in time I would bring it to the board to reevaluate that structure.
I wish I hadn't seen this design because the other ones kind of looked okay until I saw that one right there.
Could we ask the city architect to?
Yes.
No.
Sam? Thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Morning, Mr. Mayor and Council. For the record, Sam Vincent, City Architect. Can I answer your questions, or do you want me to present?
No, I thought you were going to say something about what you thought about
Well,
these things.
this I objected to the first time it came around. The reason being is that I didn't really feel like this was a proper structure for the fire department. It's not a good image for the fire department. Cheeky huts are for bars and restaurants typically. So that being said, and I told the chief that, I said, let's look at another type structure. So the second one was, let's try to find an architecture that would marry the existing building, which was this structure. And that was shot down.
The car wash.
Right, as a car wash, right.
Yeah.
And so I said, look, I think I know what's wrong here is that we're designing canopies and just little covers. In the last design that I did here, this represents a building. It is wall architecture. It looks real, and it is something I think that speaks to the fire department. I mean, this is who they are. They're a very good fire department, and I really appreciate what they do. And so the image I'm showing here is that appreciation. This would speak to the residents out there. We're here, we're real, and this is us. The Cheeky Hut looks temporary. And I agreed to it the next time around because, of the money situation. I said, let's do that, the Cheeky Hut, and let's give a time frame to this. The Cheeky Hut will stay 5 years or whatever you guys decide, and then we'll go to something like this, just to let them recover. So that was my reason for my approval.
What's the difference in cost?
This is $200,000, $225. The Cheeky Hut, I think, is 18, something like that.
18,000.
I see a lot of questions, so we'll start down here.
I'm
Rachel.
just, when this came around the first time, I said I hated the Cheeky Hut, and I still hate it, and I really do not want to have that at all. So what are the relative costs of the other alternatives?
1 second. So who's paying for this? We are?
No.
Okay.
The fire service.
Fire service. Thank you.
Well, and I'm sorry, but it seems to me when I look at my bill, the fire service gets a lot more than the city of Bonita. So, and I think that this, personally, is important to maintain the image of what we want along Bonita, the beach.
Hickory?
Hickory Boulevard. Is that where it is? Yeah. And it's not a lot to put that investment in for a longer term. 99 years of even at $200,000, how much is that a year? And again, I think it makes a statement for a service that is important to the city and for the people there. So I really, really am against the Cheeky Hut. That's the way I was the last time, and I still am the same. So I don't want anything cheap along there. That's not the image we're trying to go forward on.
That's what I thought when I designed this here, the last one. One of the consideration was the fact that they don't own the adjacent structure. And for anyone to put money into $200,000 into a structure that could be sold off possibly, they have a 99-year lease, but again, the building does not belong to them, and that is, it's not tied to their building. different things could happen in the future. And that was one of the big points here, was they didn't want to invest in something they didn't own.
Well, that's why I asked the chief about the ownership, so they have a right of first refusal on the rest of it.
Right.
I definitely think of the four, the new one that you came up with is the best, because for what it's worth, you have the additional structure and it does address that architecturally. The other ones don't. And it is, and I agree with Councilwoman Carumba, it makes a much better statement in that area.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Greg, did you have something on this?
I do, but I
You,
don't know.
you do, but you're going to be quiet.
Well,
Okay,
I
no,
don't
no,
know
I
if
get
I'm
it.
allowed.
Sure.
And I'll
Audrey?
defer to Audrey on
Okay,
this.
so he needs I just worked on his Form 8B. He is allowed to participate as long as he discloses interest. I believe people know that he is employed by Bonita Springs Fire Control District, and his vote would either come to a special gain or loss of the fire district. You are abstaining
From the vote, yes.
from the vote, but you have a right to participate as long as you let them know, and as well as go ahead and, you'll file the papers, but go ahead and
Greg,
discuss.
would love your thoughts in the
Well,
in the conversation.
Twofold. One, as an assistant chief and as an employee, I take offense to to your tax bill. I mean, we're a 24-hour entity where we provide a service 24 hours a day. So, compared to the city, and the city has other revenue, our only sole source of revenue is ad valorem taxes, period. So I personally take offense to that when those comments are made. Second part of it is we're all right. I do agree with Sam. This is a beautiful structure, but it's not ours. We do have the first right of refusal, or the district has the first right of refusal. If they walk in and say, we're going to sell this for $2 million, we can't afford $2 million to buy a building that we would probably have to tear down, that's worth $153,000 at the appraisal. And so I have a couple questions either for John, probably for John. If this board was to say, we want this, you have to build this, this is the only approval we're giving, I'm not sure we can build it, because when we were doing the renovations to the structure, we were tied to the 50% rule, which was praised at $153,000. If we were wanting to do anything to the roof, which included this, any of the structure around it was included in that 153. So I'm not even sure we can build this per the land development code at this point.
You are correct in terms of what we'll call the legal nonconforming status of the structure. I don't know how this is constructed. It looks like this is almost attached to a new wall. And so if it was a separate structure, obviously the 50% rule wouldn't apply to the existing structure. But if it was attached and an extension of it, then yes, it would apply. So there would be some consideration we would have to take into account.
And the second part of it is...
So I'm sorry, so he's saying that, I'm sorry, Greg, but you're saying if the inside wall is new, he doesn't have a 50% issue?
Essentially, if it's a you
Separate
just wind up into a setback question. If it's, but it's not a building code flood FEMA issue.
No, he's on his 50%.
But if it's attached, then yes.
It is
because
attached, I believe, in this rendering.
It doesn't have to be. I did that to screen what happens right behind it. That could be another type screen that doesn't attach. So
Well,
we can
and
avoid.
the other
A little
thing,
barbecue back behind that wall.
we've got setback problems.
Oh.
But anyway, because we're right on the line now with that building. The other thing that the chief alluded to, and I was the one who actually took the pictures, between that, where that station is, and to where Metal Arc is, there are 9 cheeky structures. And we just approved one, or somebody approved it, at Baywater Boats. They added a cheeky at Baywater Boats. So to say it's not part of the beach or it's not part of the area is just false. I mean, and those are, the chief has pictures, I took pictures of 9 of them that you can see from the road, from that structure, from that station, down to Metal Arc.
Just looks very funky next to that building. So, I mean, I agree that's an editorial comment, but.
Well,
yeah.
And it looks tacky, too.
Laura?
Yeah. It looks tacky.
Yeah, but the point, I guess my thought process of it is that then we've let Tacky walk up and down there, because Baywater Boats did it less than a year ago.
No, it's a
West Bay
different-
Club.
No, that's his, he just kind of sees customers under that.
You know,
Yeah, it's
not to jump in here, but I will.
Jump in.
If you take away the blue building, the cheeky hut looks fine, right? But in the contrast next to it, I don't know, it's a stark contrast.
I agree with
That's
that
something we don't have
fully.
to-
I agree with that fully. In respect for that building, which I don't really respect because it isn't a good piece of architecture, you don't want to throw something else into the picture here that's totally different. That it may relate to the rest of the beach, but it doesn't relate to who you are and what you are. Personally, I would not do that for the fire department. What I gave you in the final scheme is your reputation. That's you. That's your image. That's who you want people to say, that's Bonita Springs Fire Station.
The only other thing I would add, Greg and Chief, is your standards are very high. They are. In other words, when you look at the fire station right out on Terry Street, it's everything the city would aspire to, frankly, in terms of aesthetics. Same thing with the new one out east. So, you know, I think it's consistent with that.
Well, and we very much, or I very much appreciate it with my position there. It's just, to us, it just doesn't make sense. We're looking for something, a structure to save the truck. The truck that's down there is $200,000, just over $200,000, that is being destroyed every day that the sun's hitting.
Oh,
hitting
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And we're looking for something, I mean, like you said, we can't afford, and it's not our building. Like I said, if we can't afford to buy that building a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, if they go to sell it, we've lost everything. We're kicked out of there. And we've looked at alternative places to be on.
You're not
on
kicked
hip
out.
here.
You have a 99-year. Well, let's not get
If
into
they
all
get
that.
sold and they come in with something else, we can't afford to buy it. Kind of like. what
That
you
was why
said
I
about-
mentioned that, put a time frame on it. The other reason was that if this board passes the fire station you're looking at there, it would then throw responsibility on those who are not elected yet, is to follow through with all of this. So it's another consideration. But a time frame seems to be something that's workable for the short term. Maybe it's less than 5 years or something, to see what happens with that building and this being built. It gives them time to save some money to build this if they like. So that's a consideration.
Laura?
No, I agree with Amy. This is the building we should go with.
Okay.
And Peter. Oh,
Okay.
Flint.
Well, the time frame, it's not going to be, this decision is not going to change in 5 years, you know. Unless they take over all the building and renovate the whole building, that's the alternative. That's, 5 years from now. And I think part of the problem is just what Greg mentioned, is that they look for alternative use sites. So are they going to suddenly get a site 5 years from now and they can give us a fire station that is more in keeping with the other fire stations that we have all over town? It's unlikely, you know.
May I ask a question?
You
Mr.
may,
DeWitt,
sir.
is if you bought that building and the Chicky Hut was there, would you use your prototypical fire station design now?
Probably not, only because of the requirements. We'd have to bring the new fire station up to 17 foot, I believe is the magic number. So we would have to
So,
build it
yeah.
on stilts,
Okay.
and it would be something totally different than what we normally see in our current fire
Yeah.
station design.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Audrey, I didn't see your hand.
I just, because I think it's germane to the discussion, although it's a little bit tangential, I want to remind council that Lee County has a bridge replacement program very close to this. I believe they're looking at 2035, but I think the physicality of the building and the location, that might be part of your consideration in whatever you do.
That little bridge, right, I mean, just.
They're moving the bridge.
North,
So what they're
yeah.
going to do is they'll allow the existing bridge to stay, and the part that we use as a park, which is actually the future bridge placement location, the park will go away, which is North Bay.
That's where I park. Don't tell anybody.
Sorry, I love that park. But
Got till 2035.
Yeah, right. Have at it, buddy.
But-
Till
Yeah.
2035.
But there, that will be on the approach area. So I just it's
You're talking
very-
on the north side of the bridge? I'm just trying to
No, no,
envision
no,
it.
it's- look, go ahead.
The area not
North of Big Hickory Grill.
right. So
On
just
the-
north
Yeah.
of that.
On the
Yeah.
bay side.
Next to it. So the base will, and I just
I just
wanna
didn't know that was a park, or considered a
No,
park.
it's a parking lot.
Park, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, you
it's-
said park, or maybe I misheard you.
I consider it a park.
Yeah, okay. All right.
But that, the parking lot and the
Sure.
launch and
Oh.
little
Yeah, okay.
picnic tables. So that area, again, will be going for that project that when the county is ready, and that's how our interlocal with Lee County is for use of that facility. I
Okay.
just want to remind, this is on that entry, so if you make something very physical, you might want to keep that in mind.
Great. Thank you, Audrey. And Peter, did you have something? I'm just going to go up and down the line here. Mike?
Well, I had a question. I definitely like the looks of this one best, with Cheeky Hut being a second. But so you said 200 some odd thousand for this. Is that an all-in cost with all the renovations they'd have to do to the building because they're exceeding the 50% rule?
No, we would avoid the 50% rule. I would not attach it to the existing building.
Right.
So then just the structure itself.
Just
is
the
200
structure itself,
some odd
that's
thousand.
correct.
And the Cheeky Hut would only be 16?
18, something like
18.
that, yeah.
'Cause I definitely like the looks of this one better, but regardless of where the money comes, this is taxpayer money. So I would actually err on the side of Cheeky Hut for savings.
Fred?
Yeah, well, I have a question for the chief and then a question for Audrey. If they put that bridge in such a way that it interfered with this building, the county or whoever's building the bridge is going to have to pay damages. And damages would be the cost to get these people whole, number one. Number two, in the event that that building was to sell, I can't believe that you entered into a lease where they can kick you out. Because usually a lease goes with the new owner. Doesn't it say it's assignable?
That I'm not sure, but I do know it's a 99-year lease. I'm unsure, but I did want to make sure that the understanding is that although this design is, the fire board loved this design as well, but they're not going to build, from my understanding right now, that design. And what is happening with our equipment is some of our computer equipment is overheating now, where they figure out where the calls are being run, and they follow the computers and they get all the information on there. It's overheating and non-functional, so then they have to go typically by regular map. So that is some of the desire of the reasoning why, and the entire engine out there is approximately $300,000, and we know that summer's coming along and it could impact.
Chief, let me dive in here a
I'm
little
sorry,
bit.
Ask a quick question. If they're not going to build a design,
I
what are we
haven't
doing?
finished.
Yeah, if you're not going to.
Well, they're going to build the Cheeky Hut. They've only authorized me.
So why are we having a discussion?
That's the question. Initially, I talked to Sam, is that I was only authorized by my board. I brought the 3 designs to my board, and they said that to go in front of the city and request the Cheeky Hut, because they're not going to approve the money to build that.
Let me just get this clear.
Sure.
I mean, there's a criterion that was established when you got the building permit for the rest of this, that it needed to be reviewed by the city council. So that's what we're supposed to do. And you're telling me that the fire board said we don't care about that regulation?
No. They just said that they're not going to pay the money to put this cover on. They haven't had the cover on in a while, this particular cover.
So then they're willing to let the $3 million fire truck melt and be destroyed?
Well, I think that, from my understanding, the 300,000, they're not willing to pay more than the building is worth itself for a garage cover, basically.
So Greg, I mean, Chief, I'm Greg, I'm calling, yeah. Hey, Greg, sorry, I do know the difference, Chief.
We look a lot alike.
Yeah, you do, absolutely.
You need
to ask a hard question, which might not be that hard, but all of these structures, right, is still going to allow weather to get in there. It's still going to allow sunshine to get in there. It's going to, whatever. The elements are still in there, right? The truck's still going to take a beating. So when we're looking at, do we want to build a structure that's going to protect the truck? Do we want ambiance? I mean, I think in my mind, we want ambiance, but we also want something that's really going to serve the purpose that it's looking to do, right?
Absolutely. It's similar to a carport. We would love, I mean, as you well know, the stations that we do build are fully functional and high quality, and the level is way up there. However, with this station, it created an opportunity for us to put the emergency services out there, understanding that the facilities were not going to be optimal. Because when we looked at actually buying a fire station and putting a station on the beach, there was a lot of public opposition to that.
Right.
And this little, we call it a substation, was essentially the only thing that we came up with where we could provide the service that didn't create such an impact to the area, which is the reason why we went for this storefront in the first place.
Yep, no, I got you there. I'm just.
So therefore, putting the money into something like that, the board feels at this point in time that they're not willing to do that. However, should it come up where it's for sale and the board bought the property, they would put a proper fire.
Can I make a suggestion? We
station in
defer this, and I have a question for Audrey, which is, we can, under the Sunshine Law, talk to members of the fire board, right?
Yes,
Okay.
individually.
Individually. That's what I'd like to suggest.
And I'd like to see the costs of the alternatives besides the Chicky Hut.
The only thing, and I had mentioned this, I was asked that same question by the fire board, and the only way to properly do that, because we don't have a construction, we would have to put it out to bid to get a construction cost for it. So we talked to Sam, and there were some other contractors that we spoke with that said it would be approximately $200,000.
For the alternatives also, whether you, yeah, something like that.
It's going to be less. I don't know how much. My guess would be $100,000.
So, we should be in the construction business.
Okay. Fred?
So-
Well,
sorry.
Chief, I want, do you have, I'm sure you do, because you're very thorough, but do we know that if we put the truck under a cover, that won't still overheat the computer and you have the same problem?
Well, we keep our bays open, so we don't close the bays during the day. We keep them open,
Okay.
so they have a similar exposure to sun, not quite as much, obviously, as here.
Yeah.
But it will certainly help in the high heat, midday in summertime.
And salt's an issue down there, but of course salt's
Yes,
an
sir.
issue at my house, and I don't live anywhere near the beach, so I
Yes, sir.
guess. Yeah, Mike, sorry.
Going to the Cheeky Hut, I think a stark contrast is that blue roof. If that roof were a green or something, would that look better or fit in a little better?
The existing structure?
Yeah.
The owner would have to pay for painting it. But I don't,
Yeah, but
I don't know if that
mean,
would help.
if it were green, do you think it would kind of blend in a little better? And because I mean, that's the main thing you're seeing is that blue and then the Cheeky Hut. And
That's why I mentioned that Cheeky Hut's for bars and restaurants. Why? Because they have no relationship to anything else. It's just a place you go and eat and drink. And it's that kind of thing you do under a Cheeky Hut. Fire station, people have these at homes, but that's a different use than this right here. And this dichotomy here is too strong to relieve with paint. It's just not going to work, in my opinion.
what if we threw a bar under there too? the
Fire
fire station in my
department, they would-
hometown had a bar in the basement. So
You know, one other solution that I haven't shown here is a possibility. I just thought about it. Are you aware of the tensile structures? Tents, elementary schools use these for children that play out on the playground.
Right.
Something like that is a possibility. Those are $20,000, $25,000. I didn't do anything like that because the other structure here was what I was looking for. Dealing with image.
Just one last comment, I promise. Look in relationship of what this is too. Remember, this is a plaza with a restaurant bar right behind it. So it does fit it may not fit the structure of Bonita Springs Fire Department, but it fits the image for what is there. Because right behind that is the Little Hickory Fishing Nook, who has, let's call them umbrellas with tiki huts on top of them. So it does fit the area. It may not be the image that the Bonita Springs Fire Department is used to, but it does fit what's in that area. Because before that, I mean, when we were there, Freedom Boat Club was there. Right behind it is like I said, we've got the park right next to it, and we also have the restaurant behind it. So it's not with all due respect, it's not a stark contrast to what's there. There is a bar right behind there. Just like, just like let's use Castaways. You got Castaways right here, and the Tiki Hut on the other side.
Are they off limits or?
They are off limits.
Carl, those are the same birds that are flying over 041?
But
Yes.
but one thing that I think that the fires, The
They
fire
live in Bonita.
service, I think, has a commitment to putting this substation here. So, I mean, they have a long-term commitment to the beach. So we ought to figure this out, because it's not going to go away in 5 years. It's still going to be, try to make this area and continue to beautify all the things. So I don't know what the solution is, but
Well, I'd like to defer it and
Yeah.
leave us the opportunity to talk to members of the fire board.
Okay, so do we need a motion for that? Do we need a vote, or just
Do we need a
nodding
motion
of the
for that,
heads?
or-
I think just to
So
keep the
moved.
record.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
second,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, wait.
Okay, there's been a motion just to defer this and have some further conversations. Further discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Abstained.
Councilwoman Carr.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Present. Excuse me. Aye. All right. Making sure everybody's paying attention here. Okay, great. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're now going to move on to item 8, mayor and council member items. Item A,
Yeah, I'd like to ask dispensation to switch the first two items. I mailed these to Carl, and I didn't tell him what order I wanted them in. No, I didn't tell you what order. So I'd like to move B up and do B first.
any objections, council?
So moved.
Okay.
So moved? Okay.
So this is on the legal, and Audrey and I had some chats about this as well. So for the benefit of the public who aren't, did you want to say anything?
Up to you. Okay. Council, just so you are aware, this year marks my 30th year in public service, which is I consider very admirable to make it 30 years in government service. And I am one of those believers who believes there's no higher purpose than serving the public. And with that being said, I am putting in for my retirement, not quite yet, but very close. And what I suggested to Councilmember O'Flynn is that I would work with council in whatever transition council wanted to do before I turn in my paperwork. But Florida retirement system likes to have 90 days before they transition somebody to a pensioner, or in the government sense. And in that vein, I would be happy to help council as long as I receive proper notice, so I know when to submit my paperwork. And with that, that's why I thought an end date of September 30th. That way it would coincide with the city's fiscal budget. I would want to have the same terms as I would have under an employment agreement, but we would change it to a transition agreement, if that's okay.
Yep.
And I would assist in whatever endeavors council wants, whether they wish to keep it in-house and have a different city attorney, or go through, again, the charter, you can do either way, outsourcing or restructuring like Fort Myers did recently. So that's all council's call. And I will tender a proper letter later. I did not do it yet because at this point it would be a little premature, but I will tender that letter prior to that.
So Audrey shared that with me, and Audrey's one of the most hardworking people. I've seen a lot of lawyers in my life, and Audrey is one of the most hardworking lawyers I have seen. So thank you for that, Audrey, and thank you for your suggestion of working this out in a transitional way. And my view is I agree with everything she said in terms of the structure, having a transition agreement, preserving whatever rights there are appropriate in the employment agreement, and moving that as necessary, as you might think necessary. And I'm comfortable with the September 30th date, whichever way we go, in terms of outsource, or, as Audrey put it, another city attorney.
Audrey, thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Council?
So, oh, sir.
Any other, okay, Peter, I'm sorry. I didn't know if anybody else had comments or thoughts. Amy?
No, I just want to thank Audrey for her service. We've only worked together for 2 years, but she's been very helpful to me, and I look forward to working with you through September.
Absolutely.
And we're going to work you hard, too.
Well,
it seems that way, so
I
what a
want
way
to
to
make it clear,
go.
once you have a new city attorney,
Yeah.
that city attorney will be the city attorney. I'll stay in the background. for that purpose.
Okay.
So to the green sheet then, unless anybody else had comment. Oh, sorry.
Fred?
Well, I'd just like to say the same thing. I want to thank her for her service. 30 years is a big number of years of public service, and I've had nothing but good relationships with her as far as her getting information when I requested. Sometimes I got more than I wanted, but sometimes didn't always get the answer I wanted, but I always got information. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Okay. Pete?
So this, for the benefit of the public, I mean, the council has seen this, but there's not a presumption that we're going to outsource, but I believe it is something, we talked about this last meeting, had a consensus, not unanimous, but a consensus supermajority of council, that outsourcing is something to look into. And what the green sheet recites is that this is not something unique. It's far from unique. It's actually the majority of Florida municipalities outsource, and there are reasons for it. And one of the top reasons is cost effectiveness. And some of this is recited on the green sheet, and I'll go through it quickly. The notion is that when it is done correctly, that there's a key partner, and that partner is as available as the inside city attorney would be. Specifically, would attend every meeting, be available for phone calls without extra charge. That is done typically on a retainer basis on a lot of what the outsourced attorneys do. So available to receive phone calls from staff, from city council, without charging for it, unless there's substantive additional research to be done. And maybe more can be done with respect to that concept as regards a fixed fee. The other benefits include, potential benefits include, in a large firm, there is an ability that no generalist, however good that generalist is, there's specific subject matter availability among partners in various aspects of the law, everything from construction law to contract law to stuff like zoning, Robert's rules, whatever. And that's another benefit that exists. And others are recited here as well, so I won't go on at length. But my context here is that I believe we owe it to ourselves to explore this. And only do it if those benefits are apparent, particularly the benefit with respect to cost effectiveness, and not sacrifice quality for cost effectiveness. So that's my suggestion here. Now, I had thought the way to do it is to have a selection committee. I'm calling it, for good reason, a blue ribbon selection committee. These are our lawyers. We always talk about when are we going to get people outside more involved in the city. And these are 3 lawyers that have either run law firms or run major legal operations. So they've run legal operations as a legal delivery system, but also as a business matter. And the suggestions I had here were Pat Cawley, Larry Kurlander, who you should know is on the zoning board, and Bernie Long. I'm more than happy, and I told Carl, to include a city employee on this as well, if that's what's suggested. So this is just a next step, and it would involve an RFP or an RFQ. Obviously, the committee would work with Audrey, and we have to do it properly under the Sunshine Law with respect to what her workflow is, and there's a lot that she does, and a lot that she does that we don't see. So the notion would be this RFQ would be developed with staff, with Audrey, with this group. And once again, no final decision is made. The notion is we get bids. Well, first of all, we learn more. We get bids. If those bids meet the criteria, most importantly cost effectiveness, then the decision is still council's to make right up till the very end, even if the law firms go through the drill. So I see it as a proper way to conduct business with respect to the taxpayers' money and consistent with government light. So that's my notion.
Amy?
I think there are 2 points that I want to make. One is I'm very concerned that our criterion incorporates all the effort that Audrey has had to the city. And I assume that, I was pleased to hear that she would participate in the RFQ so that we could be certain that whatever she does that are behind the scenes, so to speak, which I think are an important part of the delivery of service, that they're incorporated in here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I see this Blue Ribbon Committee to focus primarily on the quality of the entities that would be delivering this service.
No, it's the cost effectiveness as well.
Plus also cost effectiveness,
Right.
because they would know the extent to which we would be demanding these services.
Right.
So I think the concern about having an outside attorney firm is that you have this retainer, and then if all the extras are always add-ons. So what you want to do is make sure that when you have that RFQ, that we don't leave too many things that are not included.
1,000% agreement.
Right. So would they be participating in that RFQ, so we'd be sure that we don't leave anything out?
Yes.
So that would be their function?
Yes.
All right. And then they would come back and say, we've analyzed what has been offered, and these are the weaknesses and strengths of all the ones that have been offered.
I'd like to work the procedure through with Audrey, because she's
Uh-huh.
been around the block on this stuff more than we have. But yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Fred, sorry.
A couple questions. I would suggest that even though only I think one of us is an attorney on council, that before this RFP go out, we would see it in the draft so we could make input.
Absolutely.
And the other one, I'm sure that's what is planned, but this committee would be a city committee, therefore they would have to operate in the sunshine, correct?
Yes, now there is an exception, and we have done it with RFPs, so that the actual meetings and discussions, when they're discussing anything that is strategy, especially like question and answer, so other lawyers don't steal one lawyer's answers, you are able to keep certain documents exempt during the point while the selection committee, once there is a notice of intent to award, that has to be out in the open. And I'd also recommend, of course, that you put a cone of silence, meaning nobody is to lobby any of the council members during this process that are participants in it. They cannot lobby either the selection committee, the staff that are working on it, or council.
Not even lobby, talk to.
Correct. Well, a cone of silence, sometimes there will be communications. Sometimes you'll have to weigh whether that person who has suddenly become your new best friend is actually, so, I mean, there'll be some judgment calls that council will have to do when they're being approached by attorneys.
Now, are we saying code of silence, meaning that if a resident comes up and they say, oh, we think this firm would be good, we're not going to talk to them, right?
You're not to talk to people about individual firms. If somebody wants to talk to you about outsourcing in general, I certainly think access to public officials, they have a right to you. But when they start going into specific firms and they look as if they could have been hired or retained to give this testimonial, that would be off limits.
Yeah. Well, how are we going to solicit? Are we going to just simply invite people, or are we going to advertise in some kind of journals of law, or what?
I think we go. Well,
I would work with the committee, but we would put it on the listserv. I have access to the IMLA listserv. I'm a member of that, as well as the city, county, local government, which of course gets all the boards, specialized local government firms that would be interested. Those are the two where we could also put in the Florida Bar News. But I will tell you, I have found better responses, quicker responses through the listserv, because people do read it on a daily basis.
And the last question, the scope would be to do what you're doing. It wouldn't be to combine what the Theriac Special Counsel does into one big package.
that's what my proposal is. I'm going to duplicate the wheel here.
And if I may, council, a lot of, in development of this RFP, council will have to make some decisions, and that would make sense if council and the committee confer from time to time on some of those decisions. For example, as noted in the green sheet, Theriac and Spain is a premier land use firm, but you wouldn't want to use them for eminent domain.
Right.
And whether you keep the existing contractual relationship, because we do it on piece by piece, road segments, you can do so, or you could have a full-purpose firm. And a good example is on today's hearing, we've had 2 outsourced attorneys that I worked with, one on your consent agenda, so the mediated settlement, so he could file his stipulation. We needed to make sure council approved it, which you approved earlier. And of course, on the referendum, I was able to retain Mark Heron, who is an elections and ethics lawyer, and he would not be somebody who would normally be in a firm, but you would still probably, even if you have outside counsel, you would probably sometimes need to go outside. Even the full-purpose firms would probably confer with some of them.
So I'd make a motion to approve.
Well, could I just ask
Yeah,
Audrey
I'm
one
sorry,
thing?
Laura. Yeah, it's more discussion.
You mentioned at the very end that Fort Myers made some changes.
Yes, so
What-
in
what
March,
was that?
they restructured their office. Understanding that work up here is actually the tip of the iceberg. I provide a lot of assistance to staff, and that's one of the reasons I also have an assistant city attorney. There's a lot of work such as platting, development orders, that you really don't want to pay an outside attorney to be doing a lot of, I don't want to say menial work, but a lot of detailed work. There's also what I call hand-holding for staff. For example, our code enforcement staff recently received a subpoena on a private case, and that was something that my assistant city attorney was able to go to court and be with them to make sure and protect them in the event the attorneys on the other side got hostile towards staff. So those are things you might want to keep in-house, so that instead of paying somebody by the hour, otherwise the staff will continue to be there. The benefit of having inside counsel is preventative. Not always, I mean, sometimes we can't prevent everything, but we try to prevent things from going south. And that's a benefit you have to inside. And we could have that structured like Fort Myers. Fort Myers kept inside both, but they set it up where you had a city attorney representing council and the advisory committees, and then you had staff attorneys who would make sure the work that the transactional documents get done. And that you might want to do a system like that, but that would be something the committee would study, I presume.
They have a big budget up there.
They do, and some of the ones that were used, I'll give an example. City of Orlando, the actual city attorney is a member of a law firm, but they have about 10, 15 lawyers in-house, I think that's the amount, that they also use for staff, because they have police attorneys. Now, we don't have police, so we wouldn't need that. So you wouldn't have to set up a whole new staff system with a zillion lawyers, but you could look at that in your restructuring instead of going completely outside.
Greg, did you have something?
Well, I mean, we can go second, go to discussion
Okay,
if you'd like.
thank you. You want to second it?
I'll second it for discussion.
And I'm just going to, in the abundance of caution, abstain from this vote, because I certainly know members that are being recommended here very well.
I don't think.
That's for
So-
selection
That
committee.
is
They wouldn't
not.
have a private
Yeah,
gain
you
or
know
loss.
staff when they're a selection committee.
Okay, fair enough, I'm just.
Right?
Abstain, you could only abstain if you actually have an actual conflict, like you have a business relationship with any of these three, or alternatively, if there's an appearance of a conflict.
Formally.
You have, but the former relationship would not be occurrence.
Okay, I'm just trying to be careful here.
I'm glad you are.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Great.
I just, you know, I in lieu of Audrey's retirement, I'm still a little cautious of this. And only for the fact that if we're going to go down this, in my opinion, this rabbit hole, I think we do it wholeheartedly also. That, you know, Theriac and Spain's on the hook too. I mean, one of your comments were, as a bigger law firm, a one-stop shop, you will have different avenues to go down. So if we're going to do it, I think we look at the whole entire picture that, yeah, Theriac and Spain may be the premier, but Audrey made that choice based on her decision that she couldn't handle or that it was beyond her purview. If we do decide to outsource, they should make that recommendation. Maybe they have a Theriac in Spain in their stable. But to say that, let's use David Theriac, he's off limits on this. He should be just like Audrey and outsource and everything. Now, obviously, we'll let him finish what lawsuits that he has right now, but in the future, I don't think we should be paying a retainer to Theriac in Spain
Or we're not.
Or
Are we?
No, we're paying hourly, and I want to bring up a point here. There was some confusion with cost recovery where we've started having staff members actually contacting Theriac in Spain. I have a 3,000 plus bill right now. Not a lot of money, but in the whole scheme of things, it's not a lot of money. It's a lot, to me, it's a lot of money. I have a $3,000 bill because a junior staffer contacted them, and it takes a couple months before I get the bills. And that's something that's going to come out of my budget that was not approved by me, not approved by council, and it's not something that we can do cost recovery because there's no permitting. Those are things that I think council needs to give clearer direction, because under the cost recovery, it's not following exactly the Estero model, because Estero is not necessarily assessing all of the costs through the cost recovery. So there's some work that staff needs to do on that.
Irrespective of whomever it is.
Absolutely, yeah,
Right.
this is completely.
Right.
So, understand that even with community development, I would like to make sure I'm in the correct rounds unless council tells me otherwise. We would handle the day-to-day small stuff. If there is something complicated, we would run it by Theriac in Spain anyway. But I paid for more bills for scheduling meetings that were done. I read an email where they reviewed and worked with staff, and it's like scheduling things and things like that. I really am, it's not the lawyer's fault. They deserve to be paid. But that's where a gatekeeper type system, and at this
Right.
point, that department does not have a gatekeeper because of council's direction. And I'd like to make sure council, of course, can always contact Theriac in Spain, but I'd like to make sure we go back to that gatekeeper approach.
Carl? Mayor and council, I've already addressed this with staff. Okay, the gatekeeper is Audrey, and that is in compliance with the contract, so that's already been resolved. However, going forward, if further direction from council needs to be done, obviously I know you'll do it.
Great. Thanks, Carl. Council, anything further?
Just a couple
Yeah,
more
great.
comments. I mean, that's one of my concerns. If we're gonna, that's one of the things that if we're really looking at outsourcing to get a larger firm so we can have many prongs of the law represented, I think it should be all prongs of the law.
So let me just finish up on that point.
Okay.
All right. And Audrey can speak to this better than I. But there is an issue on the land use about having council represented and staff represented. And that is actually part of what we ran into in a lawsuit that we won.
Yes.
All right?
Absolutely.
Right, right. And that factors into this as well.
And let me, so what?
Is that fair? Put it in
Councilmember
English,
Flynn is
please.
talking is Cherry Communications. It's in his screen sheet. And that's when you have a staff lawyer, when they are advocating a position, if there is an objection from the other side of the advocating of a position, the staff member has to cease communication. Now, that would be in-house or outside.
Right, but the point is, on land use, Theriac and Spain represents staff. They don't represent us. Council, meaning Audrey, represents us, and that's where this firm would be positioned. So I'm sorry, just wanted to add that in, Greg.
Well, I understand that, but then we're just going out because one of your continued outsourcing benefits is that you get a larger firm, you have larger prongs of law.
Right.
So, but what you're saying now, the only prong that we can use is to represent us. We'd have to go. That firm could only represent. We'd still have to go outside to a land use firm. We'd still have to go outside to a.
No. I'm just talking about in the context of staff presentations on land use zoning matters. I guess the best way to put it is the best practice, considering the law, is to have them have a lawyer which is separate than us in that case.
And certainly you can
that's
do
the
it that
issue we
way.
had.
Well,
I
and
mean,
I-
we won the case, so, all right, that's the issue we
Well,
had
they,
in
right,
Park.
the
Right.
judge wouldn't even entertain the
Exactly.
allegation.
Right.
Well, and I guess that's where my question comes. Up until 2 years ago, a year and a half ago,
Right.
we didn't have Theriac in Spain.
Correct.
Now we do.
Right.
So what happened? So 17 years prior to that, we were doing it wrong?
No.
Well,
let's
I'm
not go there.
saying,
You
I'm
can
just,
do
I'm
it,
just
right,
asking.
and understand, it just is a point of conjecture that in the event there is a
Gotcha.
complaint by the other side, and that complaint, Ms. Montgomery has raised that complaint once or twice. In that case, they waived it because they did not timely present the complaint. But,
Okay.
you know, sometimes, and the correct action by the lawyer and staff, and that's the Cherry case, is they just basically say, okay, you know, no more advocation,
Right.
and allow that. So I have worked hard to, and I've explained that to council, and it's very problematic to council because it does sound very confusing and it's not intuitive. So when staff presents a case, I sit next to staff, you know, there's a belief that I would be representing them, but council has always been my main call. So let's say staff is 100, and this has happened in cases I've been involved. Staff is supportive of a request. You know, everyone looks like the request, and of course the request changes, the public actually gets involved at the later hearings. You know, at that point, you know, it's whatever council decides. It's not, you know, anything supportive. So what Councilmember O'Flynn is saying is he does not want a situation where there looks like there's advocacy and then lack of advocacy. The issue here, though, is Theriac in Spain does provide advocacy once council has made that final decision, as well as advocacy of that. No different than I have.
Right. Then my only other comment or question or concern it very much is that with Audrey announcing her retirement, this needs to be timely.
Right.
We cannot kick this can down the road because whatever we decide, let's say, I think this should be done in less than, if it can be done, less than 45 days to look at it, because we're talking 6 months from now,
It'll be less than 6 months.
less than 6 months.
Right.
If we don't make a if we decide that outsourcing is not the right way for this city to go,
Right.
we need to find a city attorney.
Right.
And that's gonna take another 60, 45 days, whatever,
Right.
to find that out too. So I'm just, this
Understood.
needs to be timely.
Yeah. We're not gonna get, I mean, the RFP timing is such that we're not gonna have something in place in 45 days. That's just, it's not,
Well, then,
that's just not the way you do RFPs.
Well, no,
I'm
you
just-
can. We've done RFPs in less than 30 days
Well, all right,
and have it out.
all right,
I'm
all
just
right. No, I'm just saying, I don't wanna set a deadline for Audrey and this group that's not practical. I'm not saying you're suggesting that, but.
Well, I'm not
yeah.
suggesting, I'm just saying,
You can't do the RFP, have the interviews, and make a decision in 45 days. I don't believe.
well, then my major concern is that
We gotta hustle.
we've got to hustle, and
Right.
at the end of the day, I don't want to be without a law firm, and I don't want to be forced into outsourcing because we didn't do it's not timely enough,
Right.
and Audrey's got to leave.
Understood.
So,
Laura? you
Yeah,
had-
just a comment. Excellent choices for
Oh.
the Blue Ribbon Committee.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent.
Okay. Anybody else? Mike?
There was a suggestion from the audience earlier that maybe we should have somebody from staff on the committee also.
I talked to Carl about that. We can talk about it separately offline or whatever makes sense.
Well,
I'm more than amenable to that.
Well, I was wondering, we probably wouldn't want to have 4 because then it's an even number, so you probably want to add 2. I was wondering if it would be beneficial to have Audrey as one of them because she knows what she does. No.
No, I will be happy to serve as legal liaison to
Okay.
the board. I will not serve as a voting member.
My
But
su-
to Mike's point, we need an odd number.
We have
They're
a
not
number.
gonna be, this is not the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's not gonna be a deadlock here.
And they could just,
Yeah.
I mean, if there is an issue, they'll tell us what the vote is, and then they'll put it back in our corner.
Yeah, and they're not making the decision,
Yeah,
they're
it's
making a
us that's making the
recommendation.
decision.
Yeah.
You know, they have to say, well, these two are, you know, these two are their top choices, we couldn't make a decision, you make the decision, so it's,
Can we leave it? I'll talk to Carl about the possibility of having a staff person. Or what do you wanna do, Carl?
I'd prefer not staff,
Okay.
to have
That's
staff
what he-
involved. I
that's what he
think,
told me.
I think committee will be adequate, certainly for a recommendation
All
to
right, well, that's
council.
what Carl
Again,
told
you're
me, so,
making,
yeah.
you're making the decision.
Okay.
I'm more concerned about the particulars of the RFQ, and
Right.
we're going to focus on, the committee is going to participate in that, or what?
With Audrey, yes.
With Audrey, okay, I'm
And it'll come
comfortable
back to
then.
council
Yeah.
before it goes
Okay.
up.
Council, further discussion? Okay, I think there was a motion, I don't remember.
one, two.
Motion and a second, my apologies. Okay, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye, thank you.
Okay, item A, Peter?
Yeah, so A, to be clear, and I've written this in here, this is not some suggestion to please outsource all city staff. Not that. Having said that, I'll tell you what my context for this is. It really is a budgetary context, and we've talked some about this, and we probably ought to talk about it more. The impact fees are clearly a melting ice cube. They are not what they were. They're not going to be what they were. We're giving more credits out now, and there are credits in the bank. It's not going to be anywhere. Just look at our finance department's projections. The city's getting built out. The impact fees are not. We're not in a position of where the 2006 and 7 councils were, with just a chunk of change flowing in the door, all right? So that means it puts more pressure on the general fund and the special purpose funds, which basically, if you take the impact fees, is the gas tax, all right? So we got the gas tax. When you look at the general fund, we are not producing a lot of freeboard money to spend out of that general fund, which means, in my view, we've got to focus on that, as well as focusing on other sources of revenue. And that's what the whole quadrant thing at the MPO was all about, $11 million, which is federal and state money. So this is not just one place we have to find money, but others. And, you know, Greg, we've talked about this, and I know I talk about Estero a lot, but they are 3 years in, and they are dedicated to government light, and I'm not saying I want to go down to 10 employees. That'd be silly, all right? But that...
10 and a half.
10 and a half,
Yeah,
10
yeah,
and a
sorry.
half FTE, right?
Okay.
So, but they are they are sitting there now with $22 million in reserves, really out of the general fund, after 3 years. And it's not like monkey see, monkey do. That's an indication of when that discipline is applied, what it can provide. And there are so many things we have to do in this town that require real money. And I think we're going to be under some challenges because of what I said about the impact fee funds. So that's all this is. I don't intend to, you know, I just want to raise a topic today for something to think about. But I do think selectively we should be talking about outsourcing only if it's going to be cost effective and maintain the quality. Now, some people have said, well, we want to make sure, you know, the whole community development department, which is eminently available, is outsourced. Sheriff's department is outsourced. So there are ways to outsource and have people physically present. But I'm not talking about wholesale outsourcing. I'm talking about just beginning a conversation to think about it in selective places, if appropriate. Same thing with the legal function, only if appropriate. And I don't know for sure if it's appropriate, but I do believe we owe it to ourselves as fiduciaries of the public's money to be looking at it. So that's where I am. I don't have any specific proposal other than to start a conversation. I know we have a lot of other stuff on the agenda today.
Laura?
We have terrific staff, and I would just be I would be looking for a job if I was staff, because it would be
Well,
so
that's not what-
uncomfortable
yeah.
knowing, am I going to be the one outsourced? Well, I'd rather go and know that than just be on pins and needles the whole time.
Right.
So maybe we could wait to see how the outsourcing of legal goes before
Right.
we move into any other outsourcing.
And I'm fine with that, and I'm not trying to put anybody on pins and needles, and that's why I put in here, I'm not suggesting we go to where Estero is.
I just want to make one comment, and I'm going to talk more about this when Councilman Forbes' item comes up. But you did task me at the last meeting to come up with a set of objectives or tasks that we should talk about as a council and precepts. And I didn't put it, originally I didn't even have it for this meeting, but because Councilman Forbes put his in, and because Deputy Mayor O'Flynn put his in, these are concepts that I think need to be discussed in a very thorough way for what I call the council workshop, which we haven't scheduled yet. And I do think that we should expedite the scheduling of that thing. I did give you the draft because I want your input, and I think these two items that are brought up by my fellow council people should be on that. But if there are any other things that somebody wants to talk about that they think need to be addressed, this is homework, I'm sorry, and I had hoped that we would do it for the next meeting when we have more time. But this is the way I feel about your suggestion. I'm not in favor of it, I'm not against it. I think we need to talk about a lot of things. And one of them is financing. That is on my list, is that we need to have a look at what we're facing over the next 2 to 5 years and how it fits in with all these, these problems.
I agree with that.
And so I think we need like a global picture, just like Mayor said in regard to the water, the stormwater management. We can't just look at each one comes before us in a little way, and we don't see the big picture. This is why I think we need to talk. We don't need to vote on anything. We just have to have a conversation, not in this formal kind of way, but just sit around and say, well, what do you think? What's in your head? And again, I'll talk about it later under the other items. I didn't even put it in, but this is the way I feel about this one and what Mr. Forbes put in also.
Great, thanks. Council, anybody else?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, item C, update on city manager and city attorney performance evaluations and contract discussions.
Yeah, I don't
Peter
think
O'Flynn.
there's really anything to add here, other than to say, Carl, fantastic job, and thank you for all your hard work over these last years. It has been a privilege and continues to be a privilege to work side by side with you. That's it on that.
Okay. Item D,
Yeah, this is not going to be much money. I just had the availability of an outside lawyer. I'd be shocked if it's more than, I don't know what, not much money. Now, Audrey, we're going to work on a transition agreement. You may have ideas on that in terms of employment lawyers or whatever, so we can talk about that separately.
I think Mr. Houck can probably, we use the law firm of Not Evelini and Hart when I've had construction matters.
Okay.
So they are a city firm.
All right.
I've already retained them for a couple issues.
Okay.
Not that often, but occasionally we need them. And I think we can, I can show you what I want to prepare. He can review it, make sure it's consistent with state law.
Okay. All right.
And if it's okay, and then we can bring it back to council.
Okay. So if that's all right with council, I'm just looking
Motion
for a
to-
consensus. Well, all right.
Oh, more discussion, I'm sorry.
No, I just think a consensus is fine on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to discuss, is it really even necessary? I mean,
It's
but we're
probably
doing a
not.
transition.
Again, if council,
It may not be necessary, but when to have them available.
I think
That's
when I
all.
went into the statute with you, I thought you were about to get glazed over, so. I don't want to
Thank you.
totally bore y'all.
that's
Yeah,
my normal look,
yeah.
Audrey.
This is,
My glazed over look's asleep.
I think the idea of having them available, Mike, is appropriate. I don't know if we're going to.
Sure, and if
Yeah.
you feel comfortable, and if you feel
We may
comfortable
not
with
use
what.
them. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So if
Okay.
council's all right,
Good
that's
for
it.
me.
I'm done.
Okay,
Thank you,
great.
Peter.
Absolutely. Item E, this is an errata sheet, general discussion with update as appropriate by staff on disaster preparedness. Fred Forbes, green sheet 18040098. Fred.
Yeah, and actually, we're roughly a month and a half from the beginning of hurricane season. We're also 3.5 months before the beginning of the real season when hurricanes hit over here, August and September. And so I just put some items together. I think Carl passed it out to some of staff. I've got some other comments I want to tell you about, and I'm sure we'll have a thoughtful discussion here.
Okay. Hello, yes.
Councilmember, what was your expectation with regards to this discussion? Did you just
What-
want to?
Whatever we think we're gonna do on some of these areas.
Okay. Well, staff is prepared certainly to address some of those items. We
Okay.
provided them to you in writing in the errata sheet.
Right.
So however council would like to proceed, we are ready.
May I just
yes, Amy, go ahead.
jump in here?
Yes.
As I said, I wasn't going to share the work that I had done since the last council meeting because I thought we had enough to talk about at this meeting, and I had discussed this with Carl that we would work together on trying to get this list together and present it with foreknowledge to the council and discuss it because we want input from the council. So when Councilman Forbes put this in, this was one of the items that I had on my list as an objective. And I say objective versus task. But I envisioned review of the emergency procedures in a more global way with a meeting between the various emergency agencies that are responsible. And I started thinking about this because I attended, as the mayor did also, the discussion at FGCU by Lieutenant General Honore, where he told us what, in their view, with his experience with Katrina, what municipalities could do. So I know there's a lot of work that's being done. I know Bonita Springs Utilities has had a post-mortem recently. There's some concerns about, FPL's responsiveness. There's what Lee County is doing. And I know we had a post-mortem, but I think in my view, it is time to have another one where we bring all these people together to really understand what the good things were and what the bad things were, where the weaknesses were, and then together to form a solution. I don't discount any of these materials that Councilman Forbes put in here, but I'd like to see it more in the context of a larger look at this issue, which I think is critically important and timely. So I agree with all those things, but I would defer it to our workshop, which again, we need to have in a very timely way. So we could I don't want to just spend 10 minutes looking at this, looking at specific proposals or actions, which I probably are in favor with, but I want to see it, and I have to give you credit for jumping in here and giving our responses, but frankly, that's not enough, because we don't have the bigger picture. So I would ask that we defer this, and again, include these conceptual kinds of discussions for a time when we're not in this format. So.
Yeah, for a workshop format. For the drill down, Fred.
Couple points, and I don't have a problem with deferring it, but the things that I put here were the main things that the city was doing. We did not have communications that were worth a diddly damn after that thing because cell phone reception was bad. What we did put out tended to be passing things out from what Lee County was doing and all that. My goal is to simply see, I agree with bringing these other organizations in, but we need a way where the city can get out its information to its citizens. My understanding was, I believe that the Technology Committee has made a good recommendation that we use Florida Gulf Coast University's, their radio broadcasting station. And my suggestion we would hook up with two, maybe the other one, that if Edison has something, but we have to have a way to get the information to it. The other thing was making sure that we're getting information on what the city is doing in addition to these other places. And another one, it was very simple, but we waited to decide late in the game that we would put the umbrellas and the tables at all the adversely affected areas, like happened at Quinn Street. And that was a good thing when we did it, but it was way late. The other thing was we decided that we would finally put dumpsters out, but guess what? All the dumpsters were rented out. So all I'm looking for is, on the things that the city could do, a kind of a plan, and we periodically get updates. It has nothing to do with not doing these other things. Independently, I'm doing something on my own, which is I'm trying to work with Love Inc., some churches, the lodges, the fraternal lodges, VFW, Legion, and all that, about what can we do, because they all have kitchens, where we don't have to wait 7 to 10 days for the National Guard to get here to have food being passed out. We could have it out being either 1 day or 2 days after the storm. Those are the things I'm working on, and I'm doing that independent of council. I will come back and keep you informed, but, so that was the intention of this.
Okay.
But I do think we need to bring the other people in, and I think there's areas where we need to work with the fire district more to better serve our residents as well.
Thank you, Fred. Laura?
Yeah, but I agree with Amy, we should just defer this and we can bring all of this up at the workshop. So you'll just be repeating what you're saying, and it's all great, and I appreciate you doing this work. And Amy, the work you did was amazing, because you found all the questions and answers to some of the points you made.
No,
so.
I didn't do that. That's Tony back.
It's Tony.
Oh, great job.
We have a staff, we have a new staff person.
Amazing job, Tony.
Yeah.
He should introduce,
I was so impressed with you.
Yeah, no, I
I
was
still
impressed
am.
with that. No, this is a question that was raised by Fred, and Tony responded. I got your name right, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, I got it wrong before. And he should introduce himself. I think he's been introduced again, but I have to give him credit for that response. But again, here, I mean, this is an example. I appreciate the work that he's done, but I do think that it should be done with direction from council, where we say, these are the things we'd like you to spend your time on, or you tell us what you should spend your time in, because I'd like to have your input. These are just ideas that are in our minds, and we're not emergency experts.
Yeah.
You are one of the people that we'd want to go to. So thank you for the work you did, and I appreciate it. And it's not that it's not useful. I just would like to see it in a different way, and where we, as a council, decides or directs. The direction should come in a collegial way, I think. But
Greg?
I just had a quick comment, since this is somewhat my business. I think that, nobody here, the city's 18 years old. We've never had a hurricane hit before. These are lessons learned. And I think we should defer to the city manager and the neighborhood works to say what went right, what went wrong, and what can we afford, and what do we want to change in the future. And that's going to come out soon, I would imagine, just like the fire department. Every year we come out with a hurricane plan or a hurricane disaster emergency. I know the city has an emergency plan. Those things should be changed or reflected in that. And that should come from the city manager and whoever he deems necessary. In this case, it's going to be Tony at Neighborhood Services. And then if Councilman Forbes says we should have an AM/FM station or we should do that, that should be reflected in his thing. That lessons learned, that we couldn't get it out. This is how we're going to get this message out, through Laura, through Neighborhood Works. That's where it should come from, is in our emergency operations plan from the city manager and Tony.
I totally agree.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Yes.
But how do we give,
Direction.
maybe, yeah,
Well, I
or at
think-
least the questions, but Amy started this and Fred.
Well, and I think that they're right, and they've seen the questions now.
Okay.
Now, in my opinion, the city manager and not public works, but the neighborhood services manager react to it. This is what they come back to us at budget time. Hey, this is what it's going to cost us.
Well,
shouldn't they
do that after our workshop? Because this is just a big overview. No?
Carl has something to say.
Well, I just want to say, first off, you've got professionals that you've
Correct.
hired to handle these things for you. What Councilmember Forbes said is not new. I mean, we talked about those things months ago as we unpacked what happened during and after Irma. And we learned our lessons, and staff has been working since then. There is a whole network of professional emergency managers out there in staff levels in a whole variety of entities that we communicate with on a regular basis. And if I might, if the council doesn't mind, I would like to introduce Tony Backhurst, who's, again, who is the new manager of Neighborhood Services Department, and also has a background in this. And of course, he's backed up very well by Chris Campbell with regards to emergency management. And Tony, if you would just make a general overall statement of our efforts, not individual things, but what's going on.
Tony,
Thanks.
welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good morning. Yeah, Tony Backhurst for the record. We're currently amending the emergency action plan, and in doing that, we're taking in, and I think in the information provided, we're working under the principle of the SMEAC, which is the 5-paragraph plan which FEMA, everybody works under, which is, Incident Command System. And it works, SMEAC is situation, mission, execution, administration, and then you've got communication or command. Everything has to plug into that, and we work in conjunction with the EOC, who also work under the same premise. So everything that comes with regards to what our mission is going to need to be reflected within administrative and logistical issues, and situation, which is the reality what's on the ground right now. So we are working on that as much as we can, and we're looking for value input on anything like that.
Let me just, and again, I really wish we would talk about this at a workshop, but again, having gone to that FGCU thing, what I found so remarkable is where they said the first few 2 to 5 days or something, these operations that we have in place are not the first line of defense. There's these things like Councilman Forbes had talked about, that you have to get your care agencies or people that are outside of our system. They're not going to be in that emergency plan because you don't control them. But we need to make those connections ahead of time. And I know that the city is, and I commend Carl for doing this, is trying to make a connection to every neighborhood within Bonita Springs. And they're trying to get those connections so we know about it ahead of time. It's not complete, it's a horrible job to do, and we just hope we can expedite it. But it would be nice if we had volunteers and neighborhood representatives that would be incorporated into that. That's the direction that I think is outside of the system. And God knows we need what you're doing. But I'd also like to hear, I don't know if you have connections with FPL and Bonita Springs Utilities and some other areas where they've revised their plans. Just as a comfort to our citizens, it would be nice to know about it. So again, we could talk about this because it's not just it's not these few things that we're bringing up at all. It's a very big system, and we're so grateful that you're working on that. But we want to hear about it, and I think our citizens want to hear about it too, as we get nervous as we go into the hurricane season. So again, thank you for all you do. We look forward to working with you. But I think the council has a role here in trying to understand what's being done and how it's being done and how broad it is, and if there are areas where we could interact outside of the system. I mean, I have questions about how we interacted with Lee County Emergency. We declared a state of emergency. I'm not sure we followed all those things in there, all right? Yeah. It was hard to, and it wasn't, I'm not criticizing, it's just it didn't happen that way, so.
Council? Laura?
No.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor, if I
Carl,
might,
yes.
I just want to clarify, so the workshop that we're looking to schedule, expedite scheduling, is going to be council and staff. You're not talking about bringing the outside entities on for that?
No,
right,
What I
okay. Just wanna
envision,
be clear.
this is just I said I had 16 things on here. God hope that we don't agree to doing 16 things, but I wanted to provide the information to council so that they could go through it and say, oh, eliminate 10 of them, And then if we choose this as a high priority or wherever we put it on the list, then it's up to the staff to say, these are the kinds of talks we have to have in order to satisfy the concern that's been expressed by council. And every one of those things would be the same thing. No, we're not going to have solutions at this workshop. We're going to just decide whether these are things that need to be worked on. That's the way I see it. But council, please, this is supposed to be.
No, I just have one question, which is, this is a workshop on the whole preparedness, but you have another workshop about council protocols.
No, I'm talking
that's a
about
different
the council workshop where we're going to try to figure out what to work on. And at some point, if they
That's in that, this is in that?
This is in there.
Okay.
But if we don't want to do it, we won't do it,
I'm just saying it's a big topic.
Yeah,
to
it's
me.
a big, no, we're not going to, we're not going to
Yeah.
talk about any solutions to these things. We're going to just evaluate. I mean, we'll talk about it in a general way. We'll talk about whether.
It's your workshop.
It's a
Fine.
workshop,
All right.
And again, please read it. Tell me if you want to add another 4 things, or if you want to eliminate it, and we'll talk. And if you have to make suggestions, they have to go through Carl, and don't talk to me. But
And I may suggest an evening workshop. I've suggested that prior.
correct.
Okay, great. Tony, do you have anything else to add?
No.
Are you sure?
No, I'm good.
No, it's your floor. Nobody's going to interrupt you. It's all yours, Tony. If you want to add anything or comments or thoughts or. Miscellaneous.
Not good. Looking forward to working with everyone.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Carl.
Um,
Fred,
Mr.
final word.
Final word, yes. I'd like to ask Carl to investigate one thing that he and I heard about yesterday at our meeting.
Yes, sir.
And that is investigate getting those little mini towers inside our city hall and any of the other buildings that we had to have towers so we can get out with our cell phones. Okay.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Fred. Thank you, everybody. Okay, public hearing and public comment is allowed. Audrey.
Actually, Carly.
Carly. Sorry. Hi, Carly.
Good morning. This is a petition to vacate a right to relocate an access easement. It's just a paper road. It's not in existence. The owners wish to vacate it because it is in the same location as the future pool for the hotel they plan to build, and everything is in compliance with the zoning ordinance, so there are no objections.
Council?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Is there anything we should be worrying about?
Yeah, I was going to
here?
say, yeah, right.
The city has no objections to
Any
it.
member of the public?
Yeah, any
Yeah, members of the public like to speak on this?
Was this proposal, did we already have this?
We had another recent petition to vacate.
Okay, no,
Where
no,
there's a-
but this, where they want to build the
Hotel.
develop the hotel, did we address that already?
Yes, this is zoning ordinance 1701.
Right.
So city council recently looked at Imperial Bonita Plaza and approved development. During the course of going through the platting and the development order, it was discovered that there is a paper road that it could go this way, and if this way, they could move the road, and this is the movement of the road. This is basically to clean up something for a title problem. As you are aware, recently, there was the building, the real estate building, that Lime Tree Park.
Right, now I remember.
Obviously, so it's a very similar situation that could happen 20 years from now if the property got sold and the next person doing the closing wanted to have a very clean title. So it's just to clean up any encroachment issues.
Which is Imperial Bonita, Audrey?
I call it the old Albertson site, so it has on Imperial and Bonita Beach Road in the southeast quadrant.
Okay.
Thanks.
Council, anything else? Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Okay. Audrey, we have an item 10 there, first reading of the following ordinance. Public comment allowed. None. But
That's a good one. Are you ready for the second reading?
we're ready, yeah.
Okay, for the record, Audrey Vance. I'm going to read the ordinance title block into the record. I have reviewed the advertisement. I have not received the affidavit of publication. We're going to hope we receive it in the next few days. I did confer with the clerk beforehand, and she had not received it yet. So it will be on file once we receive it. And this is an ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, calling for and ordering a binding referendum to be held in the City of Bonita Springs on August 28, 2018, to determine whether a majority of the electors are in favor of a charter amendment relating to term limits, establishing the date of the election for the charter amendment to be held on August 28, 2018, requesting that the Lee County Supervisor of Elections conduct the election in accordance with the laws and regulations, providing ballot language, directing that the notice of election be prepared and given, providing for severability, scrivener's errors, and an effective date. Now, council, in your errata package that you received yesterday, there was a revised ordinance, and that would be the ordinance that we would be adopting today, along with a legal opinion from Special Election Counsel Mark Heron, explaining that it is legal to go forward with term limit restrictions, such restriction, and providing recommended changes, not to the title summary, but to the ballot summary, and also to the language in Section 13C of the Charter. The ordinance reflects his legal opinion. So the changes that you have here changes the question and also changes on page 3 of the revision, page 4, changes what he would make a suggestion of changing it. to carry through with council's direction. Other changes were recommended by David Theriak, and so I incorporated his new section 7, 8, and 9, and 10 and 11, well, 10 was there, but 11 into the code, and those were just some additional changes that were added by Mr. Theriak. Council, it's really your pleasure if you wish to go forward. What this ordinance would do would make it a prohibition on anybody who served 2 full terms as either council, that they could then run for mayor, but they could not run for a council seat. They would be absolutely prohibited whether they've served on or not, as well as somebody who served 2 full terms as mayor would have that prohibition. They could serve as council, but you could never serve more than the 2 as council and the 2 as mayor. It's the 2 full 4-year terms, but for resignation, for resign to run, for example. We have that one circumstance. That would still be in effect. And it's really a policy call whether you want the voters to consider this.
Right. So, I mean, there's been some change in language, but the effect is the same.
Yes,
It
sir.
gets rid of the loophole that we see in other cities where people serve 8 years, sit out a term, run again, serve another 8 years, sit out a term, or 2 years, or whatever the case may be.
Yes, it would take the 2 years out of office, and it would be retroactive to all people who have served on city council. So it's not going forward. Many of you were not here when we had the conversation, I believe 2 years ago, on this issue, and I said, I remember talking to you and saying, boy, if I hadn't done the research of what the changes were in 2016, I would have been shocked, because the law was completely different, and they changed, the Florida Supreme Court changed the law on term limits and their evaluation of it.
Right.
Now
Well,
that-
obviously, I thank you, Audrey, for that, and I obviously brought this forward, and we voted unanimously in the first reading of this, so thank you for checking it out, assuming we go forward, master the obvious here, but no problems on the ballot, ready for the ballot, so to speak?
Yes, now the ballot would then be translated into Spanish
Right.
by the supervisor of election. It would be provided back to the clerk, and the clerk would have the 2 advertisements. They're very specific. I believe it's the 3rd week and the 5th week before the election, before the August 28th date. It has to be advertised in the paper, and the clerk would follow through with those processes, as she always does for elections.
Right. Great. Well, I'd like to make a motion to accept, and then, is there a second? And then, of course, we'll have some public comment. Okay.
second.
Council is, thank you, Laura. There's been a motion and a second. Council, is there further discussion?
Yeah, I just,
before we go to public comment?
Just one thing, Audrey, and I don't know, can I just, it's kind of a technical point, the way I'm reading this, I don't get something.
Okay.
Can we talk about it afterwards, or we need to do it
We
here?
can, but I can't change language
Oh,
afterwards.
all right, well, all right, let's do it here, I'll try to do it quickly.
Yeah, what is it, Pete?
All right,
I mean,
so.
it's a typo.
just
Where-
go-
where are you looking?
Yeah, kind of,
If
but
it's a
yeah,
scrivener,
I'm
I'll be
I'm
happy
looking
to
at the
fix.
actual underlined change, which I guess is on your Exhibit A. The actual,
Okay, and
All
we're
right.
looking at the revised one that Mr. Heron did.
correct.
Okay.
Well, it's, right.
So page 4?
Okay, thank you.
The errata sheet.
Page 4.
The errata,
Or the errata.
well,
Of
is
the
it
errata.
different?
Where are we supposed to
It would be in the errata. It's the ordinance that is revised April 16, 2018.
No, but it's in this
There's
errata
2
sheet.
sets of ordinances. So
Is it
you had
different
in
than
your
what we-
original
yeah,
packet, I believe, one dated April 5th, and this one's dated April 16th.
All right, well,
Mine's a
I
I
want
don't
to make sure
have-
we're on
So
the
is
right
mine. It's
ordinance.
just- this is-
I gotta find the errata. So the errata language is different than this language?
Yes, sir.
Should be on.
Sir?
He well, that's the whole purpose of an elections lawyer. So there were.
All right,
one-
fine, let me just find it then.
So he rewrote the ballot question. It does not have to be posed in the
All right,
form
I'm
of a question. You don't have to put 13C in the summary.
Okay.
We went through a lot of questions.
All
and
right, Mike
answers.
just gave me, all right, so,
You're supposed to read it.
here's my question. I started with, if we're just getting rid of the 2 years, why don't we just strike that out? So, but we're also playing with the other language, and I didn't quite follow it, because it says, so, all right, I'm in section C, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 7th line begins a sentence, no one. No one shall, you with me, Audrey?
Yes.
Okay. No one shall serve, or but for resignation would have served more then?
Um,
And I don't even know where we're playing with this language, because the current language is 8 and 8, right?
the only thing that was taken out in that area was consecutive. And
All right,
the-
well, just go back to the charter if you have it. I took a quick, I really don't want to, you know, this is, wish I could do this offline, but I guess you're saying we got to approve this, so.
This is the
I-
final hearing,
Yeah,
so
all right, do you have a charter handy?
I'll get it ready.
Or maybe we can,
Could you,
Actually, I can use my
just for
paper
clarification,
charter.
are we reading off of Audrey's thing?
no, I'm reading off of
or-
what
or-
Mike
or-
gave me, which is the
or off of
addendum.
the-
I'm reading the
I know,
addendum.
but there are two things in there. One is Audrey's and one is the attorney. Now, which one of these are we reading from?
I'm
And what
reading
is-
from exhibit.
What is in the?
I'm reading from Exhibit A, page 4 of 5,
All right.
which I believe.
It's from
On the green
right
sheeting.
before
That's
the
the
attorney
draft
one in the
ordinance,
errata.
which is what.
So the answer is we're
changes
reading-
after the attorney provided me with the changes.
So we should be reading this. This is what we're asking
Yes,
people
the
to
April
adopt.
16th is the adoption
All
item.
right. Do you have a charter handy, and just look at this section? Because I just didn't get the way it read. No one shall serve or
You're
but.
correct, it says more than,
It's missing here.
yes.
All right,
Let's make that, because that's in the existing charter, thank you.
okay. Because otherwise it didn't make sense.
And I'm not saying this to be one way or another, but we had 3 attorneys look at this and approve it for ballot language and miss that.
That's not a change, though, that was something that was in the existing language.
So be it.
Okay.
It happens.
So
Okay,
it
no,
would
I just-
truly be a Scrivener's error, which is why we put Scrivener's
My
error
only
clauses.
point is, unless this is perfect and it gets thrown off the ballot, we're in trouble.
I understand, but that would actually qualify as a Scrivener's error.
All right.
So,
Okay.
but I agree with you, which is why we have the extra eyes.
All right, so more than, but then, why are we, so the existing language here includes the strikeouts, consecutive is in there.
Right.
All right, so why are we playing with this at all? Why, all we want to do is take out the 2-year thing. That's the, whatever we call it, loophole, right? The loophole is the 2 years.
After 2 years out of office,
That's,
an
that's,
individual may
that's the
qualify.
so-called loophole, and that's what we talked about.
Well,
So-
what if somebody did 4 years and then came back and did another 4 years?
That's a-
And then did another 4 years?
That's a-
Because they never did consecutive, they could do an
What are we saying?
intermittent. So I felt that
That's
was
why
part of council's
consecutive was
direction.
taken out.
Does it make sense to you?
That's
Mm-hmm.
why consecutive was taken out.
Yeah, it's 8 years no matter how,
How
whether
you
it's
do it.
consecutive
Yeah.
or.
Oh,
So
we're changing
And
something.
that's why that was stricken.
So let me use Councilman Grant, because he's sitting in the room. He did a 4-year term. He has sat out significant years. I don't know what year you left.
4.
So he could run for one more 4-year term,
Yeah.
but if you don't put in the consecutive, he could do 4 years, take
could do
off
8.
his,
Okay,
his
well,
8
all right.
years, then run
So I
again.
agree with the change, but it's another change. In other words, it's not what we talked about last time, but it's fine.
I thought it was
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
You know,
I thought it was necessary to carry out the
Intent.
intent of what you talked
Okay,
about.
good. So I'm fine, just add the more than and whatever it
That'll
was.
be
yeah,
added, thank
okay.
you.
Thanks, Mike.
You okay?
Mike?
Well, also received an email from a constituent that was suggesting maybe doing a total of 8 and then 8 off and then be able to do 8 on again. Either as council or mayor. But I agree with that to the extent of it would stop somebody from doing 8 years and then going to mayor for 8 years, because now you have somebody that's been on for 16 years. And that's kind of against the intent of what we're trying to do here with the whole term limit thing. So, I mean, because we have a weak mayor system, so you are technically another council person, even though you're citywide. You don't have any more power than the rest of us. So I don't see why you really need to go from city council to mayor. You could just be mayor without being city council. So I don't see why we're allowing an additional 8 years after city council. I mean, if we really want to be strict about it, it should just be 2 terms, and that's it.
That's what I brought up originally.
But if we are going to that system, then what was brought up in the email about having 8 years in between, is something like that I would be more favorable of, because then it stops the 16 years consecutively. It would break it up to where it could be 8 and 8.
Council?
well, I got the same email, but that's not the way it was explained to me.
Right.
The way it was explained to me is you do 8 years as a city council, 8 years as the mayor, take 8 years off, now you can start this ball all over again. That's the way it was explained to me.
I'd rather keep it simple. For one thing, I think we're gonna confuse the heck out of the public.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
And
we're trying to make it simple too, and know it's gonna be 8. Well, wait a minute, is this a term limit or not, you know? So,
And
8 and 8 and out.
to me, that's just another loophole. We're
It's a
getting,
bigger-
we're
it's a
getting,
bigger
we're getting
loophole.
one of,
Right.
rid
It's
of
a
one
wider
loophole and
one.
creating
It's
another
a
one.
wider
Or
one.
just a longer
Right?
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, larger. It's a big hole.
And always and forever, if we can't get it done up here in 8 years, right, in theory, but we've now extended it to 16, but we don't need to extend 16 to sit out 2 and do another 16 or do another 8 or do whatever, a patchwork quilt. I mean, heck, I could, if you started at 20 years old here, you could probably patchwork quilt about 60 years in until you're about 80.
You might need a
But-
psychiatrist.
Well, then
Yeah,
I would
right.
like to
I
see,
need a psychiatrist, right?
I would like to see just 2 terms then.
We had
We
that
already,
discussion.
I think we had that, and it was voted on.
I mean,
The
we-
problem is with the time frame, that ship, as much as I wish it hadn't sailed, or had sailed, however you want to look at it, we don't have time now to change this, right? Modify it, get a second reading
It
in.
would be very difficult. I have not, since this morning, when I looked at the email this morning, I sent council a copy of that email because I felt all of council, some of you were copied on the original email, but not all of you. There were 2 issues, and one was make sure everybody got it, but the second one is if council wanted to entertain that proposal, I would need a short continuance of the ordinance to a time and date certain, because I couldn't re-advertise it and meet the deadlines, and we couldn't wait till your May 2 meeting. That I would need probably either this afternoon or later on, and I have not heard back from outside counsel. I copied him on that, whether or not that was even a foreseeable situation, because it's a little more complicated. Not the language part, I could put it in the Exhibit A portion, but actually writing the ballot summary, because that's the part that you want to make sure is not confusing to the public, because that's what the public actually gets for the election, and you want to make sure that language is crystal clear.
I haven't heard council say they really, I mean, I know we all got an email.
I understand, but I'm
Right.
just letting you know the
Okay.
circumstances should you entertain
Right.
it. Seriously.
I'd move to approve.
I think it's our, didn't we already move?
Yeah, we've had a motion and a
Let's have
second.
discussion.
Okay, now, council, council, public discussion, sorry.
Public.
Unless there is further council discussion at the moment, but we're going to move on to public discussion.
Yes.
Councilman Grant, how are you, sir?
Yes, fine. I was on the original charter committee for Bonita Springs before we became a city. So I'd like to apologize for the goof I made as the chairman of the original city charter about having people run for 8 years and then 8 years and then 8 years. That's a mistake on my part. And we should have only people running for 8 years, no more than 8 years. We don't want to make this a career for life on the city council, whether it's mayor or city councilman. Okay? We're all on the same page, I take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman, and thank you for that statement. John?
I think I get the gist of it, John West, by the way. But it's rather difficult because I haven't been privileged to see a copy of the errata sheet. And, when you don't see the whole picture, you don't really understand what's going on. And I think the public deserves to know what's going on before you finally vote on a matter of this importance. I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a limitation on the length of service you can serve the public as council or mayor of a total of 8 years. That is my understanding of it. But this is all very well where you've got citywide election. We don't. And in some districts of Bonita, it may be difficult to find people to run. So what are you going to do? If you got somebody who's run for 8 years ago, you're going to stop them from running? I think it's something to think about.
Thank you, John. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Okay, there's been a motion and a second.
I thought John
Further
was gonna
discussion,
speak.
Fred.
Well, I just
Mr.
wanna-
Dulmer?
Yeah? Mr., that'd be real interesting. I want to raise one point, and that is, and I'm going to support this, but I do want to let everybody know that I think you're going to have some people that have run in the past and have always been beaten down may get on council because there's not another good candidates that's going to run. And I'm not going to use names, but they've run for the fire board and they've run for city council. And I don't think it would be a good thing so I think that's just probably something that'll be an unintended consequence, but I'm going to vote for it, but I want to bring that up.
Well,
Amy?
I think that we should let the people decide what they want to do here, and I assume we'll do some education for what we think this amendment is going to do, and go forward with that. And so
Right.
I definitely.
Yeah, Audrey?
I
I'm
just
sorry.
want to point out, Division of Elections, as far as government expenditure, has some very stringent rules on how you can spend money on a referendum issue. I'll bring that back to council, so that you are aware of your restrictions. It's not horrible or terrible, but
No,
let me
but
just.
I'm
We
sure-
can educate, but we can't advocate.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we could, you could explain what this says, right? And-
Yes,
And,
you
and
could-
we could
right,
prepare something
informational.
for the people to make, and they can make a decision, you know? that
Correct.
If we leave it this way, this is what happens. If we leave it this other way, then this is what happens, and then we'll make a decision. So I
Exactly.
think we should, they can figure it out, I'm sure.
I just want to make the comment real quick that, again, all we're doing is putting this on the ballot. We're not changing the charter right now. All we're doing is putting it on the ballot.
Correct.
The people in Bonita Springs, the voting public, will make that decision for us. That's
And if the people in Bonita Springs want to get rid of the loophole and enforce real term limits, in my mind, they will. And if they don't want to enforce term limits, they won't.
See you 2 years later.
Right, exactly. We'll just have a rinse, lather, repeat, see you in 2 years. Audrey, anything else legalese or any readings or alterations we need to do to make this perfect?
The only change I'm going to make is the part which was in the original charter, and put that in. And I want to point out to council, originally we discussed starting the Charter Review Committee in May for 2020. I know we're talking really far ahead, but given the circumstances of the city manager and I both retiring, we may want to change that deadline and contract it a little bit time-wise, so you have a new city manager.
But
at
we have
least.
to do it once every 10 years.
Correct.
Right.
Per our charter. So we do have some time to set it up, but I'll work with you on, your deadline and setting up that appointment.
Oh, so originally it was going to be May of this year?
May of this year to start the Charter
Wow.
Review Committee, so they have time to process, develop,
Right.
think of things. Then they provide it to council, and then it gets cleaned up into
Okay.
charter amendments, with council either accepting or rejecting the different ones. Generally, the city manager in the past was the liaison to the Charter Review Committee because it is a very important committee. As well as we've hired government affairs people, like political scientists from FGCU to assist the committee going forward, because there's a lot of different political ramifications of each thing in the
And was
charter.
as a 7-member committee?
I
One
think
for-
so. I don't remember that.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'd have to pull my files.
Okay.
You're suggesting we expedite it, or we?
No,
What are you saying?
contract it, set it
their
up so
time.
it's after you have a new city manager started.
It's not today's decision.
June rather than
Correct.
May is what you're saying.
Yep.
Oh, now I get it.
So there's been a motion and a second, council. There's been public comment. Any further public comment? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna we're gonna hold public comment right now. Arlene, we're gonna let somebody get here that's been sitting patiently for 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Yes, for the record, Arlene Hunter, and we do have before you under the city attorney's report the permission to advertise for the land development code changes to chapter 3. We have Alta Design here as also as a reference to council during this process. They were a reviewer as well of the draft ordinance that Alexis Crespo will be presenting for us. We wanted to, if you, council's pleasure to move it a little bit quickly so they have another engagement that
And
they need to
Arlene,
go
I'm
to.
sorry, Kathy, I see you're visibly upset. Do you want to say something, or, I mean? That's the problem with rearranging the agenda, but I'm trying to keep everybody happy, so please come forward, Kathy. Thank you. Absolutely, dear. Yep, no, absolutely.
All right, for the record, Kathy McGrath. I promised Debbie Giambo, you heard her speak earlier, she lives on Bel Rio Drive. She had to leave, and she asked me to read this into the record, and then I'll give it to Debbie. It says, in Alta's presentation and in answer to council's questions, there was no mention of the number or location of crosswalks except for the two near the middle school, which already exist. There was no mention of a sidewalk on the south side or safe passage to the crosswalks. There was no mention of temporary crosswalks. I urge council to require in Alta's plan the number and location of crosswalks with significant increase in the number of crosswalks, as there are only 2 by the school, and a sidewalk, or at the very least, safe passage on the south side to the crosswalks. Lastly, please include the installation of temporary crosswalks as soon as possible. These safety issues are significantly more important than the features in the park or the beauty of the design. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you so much,
Oh,
Peter.
absolutely.
I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Kathy.
I like to stay for the whole meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, Arlene, sorry about that. Thank you, Kathy.
No, sure. At this point, I'd like Alexis to come forward. Just as a reminder, we did bring this as a permission to advertise back in early February with the understanding that we were going to have the workshop series in February from Alta, build upon that and bring this back to you now.
Wonderful, thank you. Alexis, hello.
Good morning, or good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back before you. As Arlene noted, this is permission to advertise amendments to your Chapter 3 relating to complete streets. So we have a first reading and a second reading still ahead of you, so we don't have to make any decisions today. We're certainly looking to get your input and feedback today, though. I have gone through some of this in February with you, but we do have constituents watching and a new Councilwoman Carr. So I want to just hit on some of the points of why we're doing this. Complete streets are intended to create safe ways of moving all users along the street. So that's vehicles, people in cars, but also bicyclists, pedestrians, and also accommodating for transit. And it's about safety of movement in terms of transportation, but complete streets also are very important to the city's vision to create a sense of place, create beautiful corridors throughout the city. And we've been examining this issue for many years through your various consultants. And so we've used the tool visioning study quote that we want Bonita to be a place, not somewhere where people drive through quickly, to kind of guide this process. And so we have developed amendments to your Chapter 3 in order to implement the findings of all these great studies and reports you've had conducted over the years, starting with a Complete Streets resolution in 2014, as well as comprehensive plan amendments and studies by outside consultants such as Alta. So what we have before you is amendments to your land development code. Without these amendments, you cannot require the type of infrastructure and components we're proposing in these cross sections. So this is a very important piece to the puzzle in making this a requirement for future development and redevelopment moving forward in the city, because these studies and comprehensive plan policies are not enforceable when it comes to the ground level of design. So what we've proposed are a series of cross sections as well as text amendments to your land development code. They have all the components you would find in a complete street. So they're going to talk about the vehicle that would be in the travel lane, the appropriate widths and locations of those travel lanes. The cross sections also cover where the bicyclists fit into the picture and the appropriate widths for bike lanes based upon the type of roadway. Sidewalks for pedestrians, as well as median areas for plantings or future areas that could accommodate turn lanes as needed. Also, planted strips and furnishing zones to create separation between the various users within the cross-section. So as you review these over the next several meetings, you'll notice these components are in all of the cross-sections. One thing we talked a lot about with your local planning agency just last week is these cross-sections are not a one-size-fits-all. The cross-section is intended to guide council, staff, the development community on what a complete street is, but what we've set this up as is a menu for the prioritization of key elements based upon the roadway and the project in question. So when you look at these cross-sections, we're not looking at them as someone's going to come in and verbatim provide each component at the exact measurement width shown on the cross-section. That is the ideal perfect world scenario. What the code allows for is taking those scenarios and then right-sizing them based upon the project and based upon what's appropriate in terms of the context of the development and the roadway in which it's located on. So this is not one size fits all. And we also have a payment in lieu option where certain developers are not going to desire to construct the improvements. They'd rather find out what the cost would be for their improvements and give the check to the city to utilize to make those improvements down the road. So we have built that in as another form of flexibility into the amendment. So it was brought up at the first permission to advertise and also at length at local planning agencies. How are these decisions going to be made? And so when a project comes in on a given roadway that doesn't have a complete street in place already, we're going to be working through staff to identify what are the roadway constraints, how much room, how much right-of-way is available to construct the improvements, and what are the existing conditions. Does their neighbor have already a sidewalk section of 6 feet in width, or is it 5 feet? So we're going to look at that existing context. We're also going to look at the type of roadway and the type of users on the roadway. Something that was noted as we were building this is there's certain roads where the bicyclist is a road biker. They're going fast, they want to move with the flow of traffic, and they want to be next to the vehicle travel lane based on how they're moving. And then you've got your leisure bikers that might be going through downtown or towards the beach that prefer the safety of a pathway or sidewalk and don't necessarily want to be on that arterial bike lane scenario. And then I've mentioned a big item of this will be looking at the surrounding improvements so that we're making sure as developments come online, they're appropriately connecting to their neighbors and creating a consistent, complete street along that roadway. And so another important point is once this is invested in, once this gets off the ground, it's going to take years as projects come forward, but once this investment is made and you have a complete street like you do in your downtown area, it's done and people no longer have to necessarily spend any money to comply with this section of code. So it is something that you've got to start at some point, but there will be an ending point where you have a city of complete streets down the line. So in respect for your time, I don't know that you want me to dissect each cross-section. We have various cross-sections based on the classification of roadway. So we have arterial cross-section, wider travel lanes, separating bikers and pedestrians from the roadway because these are higher speed roadways. And then an example of that in Bonita is your arterial roadway through downtown, Old 41. So you do have a great example of a complete street that was right-sized based upon the environment and right-sized based upon the intended user within the city today. Then we're looking at collectors. These are slightly lower design speeds, so we can have slightly narrower travel lanes. We've maintained a 7-foot bike lane here, but also separating the users through the various components such as medians and planted strips. A great example, of a complete street in the nearby area is Coconut Road. That stretch between 41 and 3 Oaks Parkway in the village of Estero, where you've got a roadway section with all the various components in place based upon what was available in that area. And then lastly, we have our local street sections. These are servicing neighborhoods. They're going to be the lowest of the travel speeds. You can have situations where it is appropriate for a bicyclist to share a travel lane should there be substantial right-of-way constraints. And so we have, we went to Village Walk. We often go there for lunch at our office, and that's a good example of a developer not even being required by code to do this because it's not in your code yet, but doing sidewalks on both sides of the roadways, doing some nice street trees, and utilizing that space to ensure a variety of users can walk through the neighborhood. Your LDC amendments include additional diagrams to help guide certain scenarios where you might have a situation where the bicyclist is going to share the travel lane in a local roadway scenario, or this also happens on Bonita Beach Road as you get towards the beach, per the tool design study.
Alexa, I
Yes.
had a question about that. The marking isn't the same as what we have on Old 41, where it's a bicycle with the double chevron above it. Did the Sharrow change, or are we requiring something
This
different?
is the latest AASHTO standards, and this was actually, we updated our markings based upon Alta review.
With the arrow, huh?
And I've just,
So that's what would be used in the future instead of the bicycle with the double chevron above it.
correct. I don't know that it's, would be inconsistent to use that. I know that we, based upon direction from Alta, pulled the latest AASHTO marking.
My only comment to that is that that's the same thing that you would put in the bike lane itself. So I would just think that would be confusing that, you know, now a car, you know, you're going to have that in a dedicated bike lane and also use it on a shared, you know, single lane road. I would rather have something different so that way a car driving on a Sharrow road sees something different and they don't think that they can start driving in the bike lane that's on the side of the road on those other roads. Is my only concern about, you know, doing the same logo for both.
Yes, and you're not required to, you have to meet the minimum standards of AASHTO, but I certainly think there's room to modify this in the code if it's council's pleasure. Did you want to speak to that, Sean? Okay.
Sean Gibbons for the Record Community Development. So to answer your question, Councilman, we do have some options available. So we can tailor a marking specifically to share a situation for downtown, for example, versus having a repeated symbol for an actual on-road bike lane. So depending on what the comfort level or design specifications might be, we can alter that. So we do have some flexibility. Again, that was just a typical marking. So there are other options available between the AASHTO standards or NACTO guidelines. So there is some flexibility built in to accommodate specific user types or groups.
And so if we wanted to continue using the current Sharrow that we have, we could do that on the other roads that would be a shared
Correct.
use.
Again, as long as it meets the requirements for the standards and we're delineating it appropriately, we can also add additional signage as well. So there'll be a share the road sign in addition to just the road marking to kind of key you in on gateways or major cross sections. That way you guys would know.
Yeah, I just don't want anybody to be confused
Absolutely.
that they're driving on a shared road and now they see that very narrow lane. It'd be hard, but
Absolutely.
you know, they have a small enough car,
Yeah.
it could look like a lane to them.
No, definitely. It makes a lot of sense too. If we're having more expansive bikeways as well in terms of our lanes for on-road facilities, again, having appropriate signage to delineate this is actually biker space, not road space, and vice versa, would make perfect sense.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good comment. Thank you for that. And to your point, here's the separated,
Yeah.
which is very similar, so
But
we
it
can
does look-
look to differentiate the two through our first and second reading modifications that we'll make. And then we also, based upon Alta review, added the optional hardened separator between the bike lane and the travel lane through the diagram. We also have the option for a multi-use path, which was also something identified through the background studies you've been working on, where you could have wider multi-use paths to accommodate two-way traffic and movement along the sidewalk areas. And then lastly, we have a diagram for scenarios where you're going to have on-street parking, such as your downtown, to provide safe room for the bike lane to pass between the travel lane and the parking space area. So we've been working on this almost a year with your staff, engineering department, public works. This has gone to your bicycle pedestrian committee. They have recommended approval, and we've also worked closely with Alta through development of the cross sections. Your local planning agency voted unanimously to recommend approval at their last meeting. We had great discussion about how we implement this in the real world and the priority elements that are being applied through the text amendment. And that was the substantial amount of that conversation. And they did agree that this is really necessary to implement the city's vision for a beautiful, walkable city. Something that was mentioned was you're not the first to implement your complete streets in your code. Lee County implemented similar requirements in 2017. Collier County has required sidewalks on both sides of all rights-of-way for over 10 years. So it's certainly, based upon all the studies you've done and the direction council's looking to go, is an important step forward to making this a requirement. With that, we are coming back to you for first reading at your next meeting, and then would go for second reading at your last meeting in May. And we would just look forward to any comments and refinements we can do to make this the best possible amendment.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thanks, Alexis. Council?
Motion to advertise.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Further discussion?
I just wanted to thank Alexis and Lindsay and everybody at Waldrop and our whole staff, and I've met with them a few times. Just a fantastic job. Thank you.
Ditto. Roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba? Aye.
Great, and we're going to go back to public comment now. If other members of the public would like to come forward and speak, please do so at this time.
Yes.
Councilman, how are you?
Alexander Grant, former councilman, and I'd like to mention one thing. I'd like to have the city attorney give each of you a copy of Resolution 06-119, which was passed by a vote of 6-1, resolution to the by a previous city council of which I was a member, concerning passenger rail service in the city of Bonita Springs. And in relation to that, I am willing to participate all I can with the Sonoma Marion area rail transit system in California and try to duplicate that system in Bonita Springs, Florida, and Lee Collier County. So that's where I'm headed for. I'm determined to bring passenger rail service to the city of Bonita Springs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other members of the public? Hello, John.
John West. I just want to mention that the website, I know is being, I think, redone or so, but every time I look at the events going on in Bonita, I see the same one, and it dates back to August 2017. A lot has happened since then. I think it should either be removed or something else put there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, city manager's report. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Call the council's attention to the errata sheet, just another errata here. This is the updated report on impact fees that you asked Duncan Associates to make changes to in order to make sure that the numbers were perhaps at a more appropriate level, if I say it that way. He has done that. I have not provided you the information of how this compares number by number to his prior proposal. However, you can see from the email that I placed at your places today from Clancy, he indicates that this particular scenario is one he's recommending because the numbers are more at a more appropriate level, and considerably so. So we are looking today, if you have, and obviously Clancy's not here, if you have questions we can't answer, then we will make sure that Clancy gets the answers to those questions. We do have one thought from community development with regards to the land use type list. And John, you want to come up here on this? And I believe it has to do with the senior adult housing and that separation from other types of units. John?
Morning, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we just talked about Logan Road earlier today, and I had spoken about a GL Homes project that more than likely they will use these credits or potential credits towards, and that is a 55 and over community. We haven't, I know that in other communities they generally see a reduction in trips for those deed restricted communities of 55 and over. That is not generally the case in Bonita Springs. We've seen actually a different traffic pattern from those communities, but we don't see a reduction in trips. Therefore, based upon your local trip usage, I would recommend you not accept that line item because it is a significant reduction over a standard single-family home, which would make sense if there was a significant reduction in use of the roadway, but that's not what we've witnessed.
Okay, Council?
I agree with that.
I agree too.
I agree.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, what we're looking for today is authorization for the city attorney's office to start drafting the ordinance to implement these fees. And in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll put together a comparison of Clancy's first proposal versus these numbers. We're looking for that approval from council.
I'd like to make one other suggestion, and I apologize in advance. I have not looked at this. All right, so maybe it's done. But I noticed when Greg and Fred had really dug into this at the last meeting, one of the ones that someone brought up was this notion, John, of the high rises don't get the traffic. And I live in a place where the high rises, and I don't see the difference. And I would just assume, if you haven't done it already, make the same adjustment, not discounts for high rises as you go up.
I agree with that statement. I think that multifamily tends to be multifamily, tends to be multifamily.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Not to put in the 3 tiers?
Right.
Show it like the same as what is low rise?
I think we probably need a recommendation
Whatever,
from Clancy
John.
on that, but yes, sir.
Yeah,
I
whatever.
think
Talk to Clancy, we'll get the change
but
made.
going to
Well,
one
okay.
multifamily is something
Yeah.
we can easily
Yeah.
support.
Not discounts for height. I mean,
Yes, sir.
It's actually counterintuitive,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
well, at
the
least.
better the view, the higher the impact fee.
yeah.
Councilwoman Carumba?
I don't think we're supposed to, I don't think we're
People
supposed
on
to
your
do it
floor
on
not go down
evaluation.
as
We're
much?
supposed to do it on impact. No, but I agree. I mean, our cars are always out of our garage, so they're going somewhere, you know.
And the people on the 3rd floor are not leaving more than the people on the 18th floor, I would
No.
assume.
As
Oh,
long
and
as-
that view.
As long
Oh,
as the
boy.
elevator is working, we're out of there.
And also, one minor note, Mr. Mayor, we've seen a different model of car wash that is coming forward. Probably not that big of a deal, but one of them is under construction now, and it's a semi self-serve, semi automated car wash. And with your recommendation, we'd like to have Clancy try to create a classification for that, because right now we don't have a classification that truly applies to such use.
Okay.
What would be different, though? I mean,
We
Everybody's
have
coming to get the car
automated,
wash.
we have self-service. These do not follow either of those models in terms of traffic impacts. And so it's not a big deal, but we are dealing with it right now.
Okay. So you want a motion, Carl, and a vote and the whole deal? Or
Yes, sir.
are you good with the nod of the head?
Well,
Okay.
as long as everybody's okay, we will
Yeah.
move to draft the ordinance with the changes that have been
Right.
suggested
Yes.
today.
Yes,
Okay?
absolutely.
Okay. Next on my agenda, speaking of hurricane season, yes, it's coming. There is a training session for all of our residents to be held on Thursday, April 26th at 6 p.m. in the gymnasium at our recreation center on Pine. And we'll get some additional information out, but I wanted to announce that today. and let you know about that. And then I think Arlene has something. Arlene?
Great. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you. Quick
Greg?
question, Carl. On that, that's not a training, it's a informational, like a update, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Right.
You made it sound like a training that they were gonna
Well,
do something.
it's really an educational.
Yeah,
here's
it's an
what-
educational, I
Here's
know
what you
the-
need to do to get ready.
Exactly.
Those kinds of things. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Question?
Thank you.
Shouldn't we do this more than one time? Because you can't put enough people in that place to hold very many, I would think.
I will tell you from last year, there were 12 people there, if that.
It is, we barely get attendance, but we are the location for the Lee County EOC. They want to do one in Bonita Springs, so they do work in conjunction with our staff to have it at the rec center, because it is a large, full-size gymnasium. But yeah, we typically, the most I think we've ever gotten is maybe 40.
So get your peeps down there, Fred.
All right.
All right?
Just so you know, Fred, what it is, I don't know if you ever returned, I attended it last year and the year before. Basically, they have somebody from the EOC come down. Last year it was Jim Bostad, which is the project man, or PM of the EOC. A weather person last year was Kristen Christain, and then myself from the fire department, just to explain each aspect of what happens if a hurricane comes this way. So that's what the training's about.
Well, I know that Pelican Landing is, I think 3 of their board members are coming to this because Pelican Landing is revising their emergency procedures, and they're looking to have some input from that. Hopefully, it's substantive enough that it would be helpful to them.
Would there be any harm in videotaping this and putting it on our website, or do you?
We'd be happy to arrange for
I
that.
think it, and then if we
That's a good
kind of
idea.
tickle it with an e-blast, some people might watch it or something.
Right. We'll do that. Okay.
They
Great.
love to see Greg anyway.
Yeah.
I won't be there.
Oh, you won't?
I am photogenic, but I won't be there.
Whoa.
It's not
Arlene, you
conceited,
had
that's
something.
confidence.
Yes. Prior to the meeting, we distributed a draft letter. Our partners with with the CDBG program at Lee County had requested an administrative letter confirming the 2018-2019 fiscal dollars, the projected use of those, and in the categories eligible for CDBG. We just wanted to confirm with council that the same interest is still moving forward, that would be dedicated to road, drainage, and infrastructure projects within eligible areas, which includes bicycle and pedestrian multi-use pathways as well. We are hearing from Lee County that our estimate from the program is going to be at $322,000. That is inclusive of that number I gave you prior. So we have approximately $348,000, which council has committed to the use of multi-use paths, and looking into the next fiscal year, we'll have the 322, which would be approximately $671,000. CDBG funds. And to repeat, these are not disaster recovery CDBG funds. That is a separate funding source. And so we'd like just to confirm that that's the direction council would like us to go, and then we would send an administrative letter.
So moved.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Great, absolutely, thank you. Wonderful, okay. Audrey, I guess you're good, right?
I'm good.
I'm going back to you for last call. You're all set?
We're all
You're
set.
still all set? Carl and Arlene, you're still all set?
We're good, Mayor.
Okay, fantastic. I guess we'll move on to mayor and council member reports. Fred, why don't we start with you?
Well, I already told you what I'm doing with the some of the volunteer groups, but one
Yeah,
thought.
speak up, Fred.
One thought that I want to leave with everybody, it's not that far away till we get into the budget workshop. And I would encourage us to not jump in and put a trim figure out that's right where we're at. We need to be higher. We can come down because, you know, all the money we spent on FEMA, if we had another hurricane come through here, we'd be hard pressed to find the money to spend to get FEMA match, you know. And then we have other projects, so I just throwing that out right now, that it kind of echoes what Peter O'Flynn said earlier in the meeting, I believe, about money.
Thank you, Fred. Mike?
I'm good, and I have to run, so.
Okay.
Ah, there you go.
Peter?
Just real quick, reflection on something. Many of us will remember when Ian Lockwood just mumbled something about a road diet out toward the beach. Really just kind of mumbled it, and it kind of got weaponized in the whole election thing. But it's interesting. You drive out toward the beach almost every night now, and you'll see a backup because we have a very popular restaurant out there. Cars are backed up, 5, 10, 20 cars. No one's complaining, and no traffic is getting backed up. They've functionally done a road diet out there. Just a reflection.
To go into the restaurant to
Just a
get
ref-
off the diet.
Just a reflection.
Yeah, okay. Laura?
Just to comment on HR 4770, it's the correct step forward to permanently prohibiting offshore drilling. It's not only good for our city, Southwest Florida in general, but the whole state of Florida. And with Congressman Francis Rooney, we have a tireless advocate who is dedicated to opposing permanently all offshore drilling. So I think it's wonderful that we are going to officially send him our support. And I think Congressman Francis Rooney will be happy about it.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Thank you very much, Laura. Greg?
I just got one comment, one question, I guess one statement that I think I'm gonna bring up a green sheet next month, or for our next meeting. With Carl's retirement, I think we need to start this search for a new city manager sooner than later. Because before we know it, May 30th is going to be here. We need to name it an interim one, because I think just from what happened in Marco Island, it took them 6 months to get somebody, then they're back at it again. So this is not going to be a quick turnover, hey, let's go pick Pat in the back to be our city manager. It's going to be and we need to decide what we're going to do. Are we going to put out an RFP, RFQ? Are we going to go out and hire a firm to be a headhunting firm and say, go forward and find us 5 people that fit the bill that we're going to bring. So I think we need to do this, and I think I'm going to bring a green sheet up next for our next council meeting, just to let you know what I'm thinking right now and trying to get this ball rolling.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Was that your comment, question, observation?
All 3 of them,
Okay,
yes.
you got them all. Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
I'm with you.
It matters, right, Fred, whether it's a
Ditto.
question or a comment? Yeah, right.
Ditto, okay. No, we definitely at our next meeting have a lot to talk about. And I just want to mention one thing, that I have a follow-up to a decision that we made, I don't know which meeting, a couple of meetings ago, in regard to taking over medium and electric lights by Worthington, all right? And I said I was interested in having a discussion about what our processes and procedures are for taking over responsibility for roads, for paving them, for putting walls up and all this stuff. And I think we should consider that again. I think it should be in that workshop. I'm just going to add that on. I didn't have it on there. But I thank Audrey for giving me the backstory to this, so I understand it a lot better than I did before. But there is a process that we've been going through in council where former decisions are made and then we alter them in the future. We don't know how they all work together. It's
Right.
Again, looking at the big picture. Instead of looking at it in isolation, we have to see what we're doing and what we want to do in the future. So that's, and again, I've already given please read my homework here and give input to Carl. Again, these are my ideas. I also tried to incorporate the comments that were made in the performance evaluation for your information. And we could take them or leave them, but these are council people that have already spoken, and I just summarized it. They're not my ideas. So if you could help me, that would be great. And let's please get a workshop in the evening, as Mayor has suggested, and because we have a lot of things to discuss, as is obvious from what we've done here today.
Right. Wonderful.
Greg, one thing I just wanted to suggest with respect to your green sheet, I assume you're going to leave open the possibility of, we do have in-house resources here.
Oh, yeah, no,
going
I
forward.
think that's the first I think that's the first thing we need to do, because there's no way that we'll be able to replace Carl in the time frame of his retirement.
Right.
So we're going to have to name an interim.
Right, but what I'm saying is, it's not inconceivable that that could
Correct.
be even a long-term thing.
It could be a
Correct.
Right.
No.
So that's part of the discussion.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Council, I have a couple of things, and I don't know if you got this email or not. I did forward it to you and to Carl and everybody else, and if you already got it, I apologize that it's, this is from DHS and FEMA. They're doing a listening session in Florida during the week of April 23rd. Dear Mayor Simmons, I am contacting you on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties in Washington, D.C. The head of our office and 2 senior FEMA officials will be traveling to the Bonita Springs area on April 24th, 2018. We are hoping to meet with organizations who represent people with disabilities, the elderly, and people with functional needs who may have been affected by last year's hurricane. Please see the attached invitation. We also want to hear from local government and community members. Our goal is to hear about concerns, experiences, and recommendations in the wake of Hurricane Irma. Getting this feedback will help FEMA and DHS improve preparedness, response, and recovery. Please forward the attached invitation to anybody who you feel should be at this meeting and ask them to attend. We are especially interested in having first responders and emergency personnel attend. Please have them RSVP such and such. So I have forwarded that to all of you. Did you guys get that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, either way, Carl, I don't know if you could help distribute that. I don't know if this is something we would want to invite community-wide to send to our email blast list, but I'll just kind of leave that internally to you folks to, yeah, I did, yeah, to get it out to folks. And it's Tuesday, April 24th, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, Bonita Springs Chapel, 20601 Three Oaks Parkway in Estero. Yeah, so Bonita Springs area, right? When you're up in D.C., close enough, right? Yeah, it might, yeah, right. Yeah. So anyway, would like to encourage people that are able to attend that, please do. Thanks, Carl, for helping get that distributed. And then I got in the mail here in my pile from the city of Cape Coral and Fort Myers Beach. Bottom line is they've passed resolutions, and I know Greg and we've probably all heard a little bit about this. Florida League of Cities was involved with this. Bills that may preempt the authority of local governments to protect their citizens from the detrimental effects of short-term vacation rentals in residential districts. So I've got two resolutions from neighboring cities. I feel duty-bound to hand these to Carl or Arlene to look at. I mean, it's been a long day. I don't want to drill into it now. Do we want to look into this? Or have staff look into it?
Have them look in it, 'cause you've got a 1
Yeah,
o'clock
yeah,
meeting.
no, absolutely. Absolutely, buddy. But, all right, so I'm Carl and Arlene. I'm going to give these to you as well as a couple of other legal things here and registered letters. But send it to me. Boy, yeah, right. Send it to Simmons. Boy, if they only knew. Okay. Very good. So that's it from me. Council, thank you. Staff, thank you. Carl Audrey, thank you. We've covered a lot here. Been a good meeting, and that's it. So a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay. Public comment. We're going to give final call on public comment. John, you got something else? Okay, I think we're good then. Addison, you got anything?
We have no comment.
Okay, buddy, we're good. Thad, you got anything? Okay, buddy. Motion to adjourn? Wonderful. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.